Well, shall we try another moderately successful intro? Does anybody else want to do it?
What's
like just hey, welcome back, blah blah blah, or something like that?
No, go ahead.
All right, I'll do it. Well, here we are back again for our weekly edition. This is the third week in a row. This is probably the most we've done in a row in
I think so. Yeah.
well, ever.
Yeah, it might be
in 5 years. So
Without
thanks
hiccups,
thanks for tuning in, folks. We got cut off. We cut ourselves off last week because we talked for almost 2 hours about ourselves, which is pretty successful, rather than about.
We're very proud.
Yeah.
That we've talked about ourselves for almost 2 hours.
But so
Before
this
we
week,
diverted,
yeah, this week we get to talk a little bit about some movies. I intended to watch Parasite yesterday for this conversation, but I failed at doing that. Have you seen it, Eric?
No, but what I will tell you is I watched just finished Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because I knew both of you had seen that. Mm-hmm. So I do want to watch Parasite.
Great.
However, I wasn't going to be able to fit that in today.
Yeah. I wanted to fit Parasite in, but it didn't happen because I was up all night long. I set up my new studio at home. So just outside that door behind me,
Nice.
I put up a backdrop and camera and lights, all my stuff that I would normally have for some YouTube videos. So I'm going to start shooting some YouTube tutorials, some YouTube tutorials yeah. Over there.
Turtles?
Some YouTube turtles.
Tortellinis.
It's just me saying, I like turtles. That's it.
I like in different voices.
You gonna put the
accents,
skull makeup
regionals.
on?
Yeah.
And do it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Oh, Eric blocked out here.
Where's
That's
the
a bummer.
zombie makeup?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
That kid's wonderful.
Yeah.
Have they tracked that kid down to talk to him?
I hope so.
I
I
think I've seen it's like on Tosh.0 or something like that where they caught up with him later, and he's a teenager now, and I think he asked him or somebody asked him like, "Do you love that video?" He just shook his head. He's like, I wish it would go away.
Oh, yeah.
Please make it go away.
Welcome to the internet.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
There's one of me
I mean,
at
we
a
make this
air
joke,
show.
but like all the dumb stuff we would do.
Oh, yeah. No, if we
Well, I mean,
didn't
we have.
We have them, but if we didn't have VHS that could potentially get written over at all times and we had all of this technology, I don't even know. I mean, I feel like if we were in high school and TikTok and Instagram and all this stuff was a thing, we would have been. We'd be the presidents. We'd be collective. They'd just be you guys. All three of you be the president. We'd be like, okay, you're welcome.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about it. I did a clean out a little while ago, and I found like my stack of VHS tapes from my first apartment in Colorado. And one of those VHS tapes was the Terminator spoof that we made.
Yes.
Which I know I made copies for you guys and distributed them out, but I imagine at this point, A, I can't find a VCR to try to watch it, and B, I'm nervous about throwing it into VCR and just have it get destroyed.
Yeah.
But I do have the original computer that I worked on, I worked on it on.
Wow.
But I think I got an email the other day that it's like Windows license has expired. I think it's like Windows 98 or something like that.
We can't support this anymore.
I thought about just firing it up, not connected to the internet whatsoever, and seeing if I can pull that footage off and get it to you if I can. Because we're just widow kidlings when we shot that.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's good stuff.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, it was a fun school project that I got to work on. I'm glad you guys let me do that. But that one scene I cut in from Terminator 2, so the whole movie has like no soundtrack or anything except for like this 2-second like do, and then it's like right back to us. So it's when we did the.
Was it like Terminator Vision or something?
It was when you got stabbed and you pulled the metal piece out.
Yeah, all of a sudden I'm on the grate and I'm pulling the.
That's why I spliced that
metal
part
bar
in.
through me.
I think that my favorite outtake from the Terminator movie, the one we did with Joel, right, at his house, was there was the moment where your Terminator character, Eric, makes my Terminator character and shoves my arm in between like the banisters, and so I'm supposed to be like stuck in the banister and I can't get out. But the action was, okay, so I'm gonna reach for you and try to get you as you're just calm, coolly, and collected walking away. Except you were like 2 feet away from me, and so I just reached out and just
barely
grabbed your
away.
belt. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you looked at the
outtake.
camera and you were just like, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should. Yeah, I need to dig that up. I had a VCR around here somewhere at one point, but I think it's long gone. But
One thing I
it's
do
on
remember was
DVD,
I was
though.
in. Yeah, did you burn it?
I think I either don't have my copy, or I gave them all away. Like I think I made just enough to hand out to you guys, and then I either misplaced mine or it's buried in a stack of like, maybe labeled DVDs. I don't know. I'll do some digging. I do want to
I
resurrect it. Though. I
definitely
think it'd
have
be
it
great.
somewhere. I'll have to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
When I learned how crazy I am,
So,
because I felt like Matt, we put makeup on you, and then I was like, okay, now there's a later scene. We gotta get more makeup on you, and you're like, I think we're fine. And I was like, we need more makeup. We need to get more makeup
Yeah.
on him.
And it was like
That's my
I
first
didn't
step.
want. Yeah, we had been shooting this thing for hours, and I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to go and put more makeup on. And you're like,
Why,
well, I
Eric?
did it.
There- no
You're
one
like, well,
needs
no,
it.
I know you did it,
It
but
needs to
that
be.
doesn't mean that the whole world needs to put on Terminator makeup because Eric put it on.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah,
I do
well, it was
remember-
wonderful though.
The old Bronco 2 that we used, I think when we were shooting, it was like 15 degrees out or something like that. And we were shooting the scene where the Terminator busts in
Oh, yeah,
through the
it was
back
winter
window.
break.
Yeah. And my car was not doing so good, so we kept like gunning it, and it just kept like dying, seizing up in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So it was like,
The
all right,
parking lot of
all right,
the-
now gun
of the
the
high
engine.
school.
Like, vroom, vroom, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, gun it. Blah, 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 blah.
It was almost a Karate Kid thing where you had to push it and then pump it and then go. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was good stuff. That was a fun time.
Oh, that's fantastic. Phenomenal stuff.
But so anyway, coming 2021,
Yeah.
probably just as good as
Terminator
Dark
3.
Fate.
What did we call it?
Oh man,
Did we have a name?
I don't think we did.
Maybe you assigned a name, Nick, but I don't know.
Oh,
if,
it was, yeah, I think we ended up calling it Terminator Decision Time. Something
sounds-
funny
that's-
like that.
Yeah.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, because we couldn't do Judgment Days. We did
Right.
Decision.
Decision Time. Except we could. No one's ever seen it, but it might be a good one to show. If I can rustle it up somewhere and find a way to put it on, like tag it onto the end of this video or something. Be kind of funny.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll see if I can. I've been cautious about firing up that old computer just because this is like pre-real virus software.
Mm-hmm.
So man, I don't know what's gonna happen when I turn it on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It might blow up.
You might unleash a pandemic. Oh, wait, too late.
Oh wait.
Yeah.
It might prevent the pandemic.
Maybe.
Pandemic
You guys have
2.
watched. Sorry, I won't segue into anything long, but I just want to. I watched yesterday. Last night, I binge watched on Netflix. There's the Children's Hospital. They
yeah.
did a
Oh,
show.
yeah.
David Wayne did the spin-off, Medical Police, I think it's called. It's like ridiculous and fun, but the whole thing centers around a worldwide viral pandemic. And this thing dropped in like January. And so I was like looking everywhere online. So I'm watching it and it's fun and it's silly, but at the same time I just feel this dread because we're living in a global pandemic and it's
Right.
actually happening.
Right.
And I was looking everywhere afterwards to see like has David Wayne, have people interviewed him since, like, hey, you just made the show. Haha, guess what? That timing, huh? How about that?
Right.
Couldn't find anything. But
Well, there's
He was
it's
called up by the
enjoyable
president.
and
He's on the
depressing.
board. He's on the task force.
Yeah.
it's when when Lord of the Rings was coming out and the second movie, The Two Towers, just happened to be the movie that was supposed to be released in December 2001, and everyone's just like, "Oh, that's the worst timing. Should we change the title?" I was like, "Well, no. I mean, it'll kind of be be a little hurtful to the heart for a few months, but then now that we're almost 20 years out from the release of the movie, no one's going to remember that was a thing. You know?
Yeah, right.
Right. Only all of us, but
only
exactly.
just literally everyone.
But we don't carry. Yeah, I don't see.
I won't make the joke. The joke's evil. I won't do it. You promised never to forget.
It's true. It's true. Well, the what do you call that thing? I guess
Hobbit.
The Hobbit was supposed to erase it from but the Hobbit was not a great. I didn't like
the trilogy
any of the Hobbit movies. Yeah, at all. I thought they were
and even
awful.
Peter Jackson himself was like, I got stuck with it last minute.
Yeah.
So we were not ready, and it was a nightmare. My bad. He at least fessed up.
Which is crazy because that's just no excuse. You don't have to make a movie. No one's holding your feet or your hands to an oven saying it has to happen.
Man. Well, here's the thing. If he didn't make it, it would have moved away from New Zealand, and he didn't want to lose all that work for New Zealand.
Gotcha.
So that's why he, I think, agreed to do it, because it was already being shot there, and he said, oh boy, if Del Toro's not doing it, and they're kind of asking me to do it, if I don't do it, it's going to go back stateside or to Europe.
It was supposed to be Del Toro was doing it originally?
Del Toro originally, I think, yeah. And then he, right before filming was starting, I think, it's this big cluster, you know what.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And then at the end, it screwed up the unions. Again, just a quick little thing here. But it screwed up the unions, so now, like their weekend, all the film industry people in New Zealand kind of get screwed, and they work for a lot less. So stuff goes over there to work for cheap. Kind of like, oh, let's send it to China or India. Yeah. It'll be cheaper. That's what New Zealand became. Right. So it was this double-edged sword of like, hey, we got that trilogy, but we got
at what cost? Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Where would it have gone?
Anyways,
where would they have just shot it in Romania or something, Eastern Europe-y, or
maybe even
Hollywood?
Or maybe even Australia. Is 20th Century Fox? No, that was New Line.
New Line, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know where it would have gone. Yeah. Probably Eastern Europe or something.
Makes sense.
Or a lot of soundstage. Yeah.
Yeah. Which it already kind of is. And
well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was.
But there is a certain amount of like majesticness you can't copy, like people walking through grand mountain ranges or cresting hills and stuff. You can't fake that.
I remember in the special edition extras, there was a point which the little video was about color correction, and they had to actually dial back the saturation on the Shire because what they actually captured was it was just too green. They're like, no one's ever gonna believe that the Shire was this lush, so I actually had to dial it back a little bit.
Oh man,
right. That makes sense. When I went to Ireland, I essentially was like, okay, it's a little too much. Yeah. Okay, Ireland, I get it. You're green, but this is like, come on, you're just showing off.
Get it? You're green.
So I get it. I genuinely get it. Right. I went to Ireland, and I didn't go, this is gorgeous. I went, you're showing off a little too much. Pull it back.
Now
Bring
you're
it down.
You're getting a little showy, Ireland.
Yeah. So like Wales. I was like, Wales has some brown in there. Cool. I like Wales. It's a good mix.
Well, it was the first time that you've been out of the country, right? And it was, our junior or senior year?
Post-senior was right after I graduated.
Something like that. And so you went from our bland brownness, and you're like, okay, Ireland, now you're just showing off.
Went from 2 to 11.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. So,
and speaking of Ireland,
I gotta run up and grab a internet cable to bring down and hardwire into my computer because it's not recording, or it's not showing Nick on my screen right now because I have 15 megabits per second out in the middle of nowhere.
Oof.
So I'll cut this part out, but just give me like 2 seconds. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure.
Hardwire.
Hardwire. Is there an action movie called Hardwire?
Probably. I wouldn't doubt it. A straight to video version of something, probably.
Right. Oh my god, I like how Bumble, I'm like not touching Bumble because I'm like, I don't want to talk to women when I have no chance of going on a date. Like, what am I going to talk to someone? No.
You gotta Skype call a date.
Yeah, right. And the dudes are like, oh, we have video options. I'm like, Like, I'd
I'll
rather have
DoorDash
this
you a meal.
go downtown. You know, I'd rather have this go nowhere just in person when we can finally do a real date. I don't
I
want
want to crash and burn in person.
Yeah, I want to do the normal. We barely chat. I knock down I nail down a date. We go, we hang out. Either one of us or no one is interested, and it's done. That's the old-fashioned way.
I want to do it in person.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what's going on outside that screen, this little box that you're in. I don't know what's happening.
I don't know.
There could be another guy right there.
Exactly. You might be catfishing me, even though there's a slimmer chance of being catfished, I guess, if you're doing video. Oh, what was Hardwire? I already forgot what I was doing. Okay. Here we go. Hardwire movie. I came up with a stupid movie title. Blood Hard? Like, oh, that'd be a good one.
Is it about a serial killer who gets erotically turned on when he commits murder?
And then he
Johnson, what's wrong with you? I'm sorry, Sarge. I'm blood hard.
I'm blood hard. That's just about boners. Yeah, I guess the more I think about it, it's just like a boner reference. So, yeah, I was like, it's like Die Hard. It's like Bloodsport. It's just putting some badass names together. But yeah, it's pretty much just Erection, the movie.
Erection, the
movie. The motion picture.
Lady Blood Hard. We don't know how that works, but it works.
Blood. There is an actress. She's like Native American.
Was it Moon Bloodgood?
Moon Bloodgood. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. She was
from
in Terminator
Salvation.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Look what we did there.
We just looped it back, and old Jacko missed it. I think I'm just gonna start calling Matt Jacko. Now that Michael Jackson's long gone.
Yeah, that's fair. You can take it back.
We can lift the Jacko can be repurposed. Yeah. Okay, Hardwire. Oh no, there's Hardware, which has a really cool poster, but I think it's like this awful cheap ass movie from 1990. And then Hardwire movie 2009. Oh boy.
Also Damon Wayans.
Oh my God, Val Kilmer and Cuba Gooding Jr. are in a movie called Hardwire.
Oh
you can
my.
see that. Yeah.
Wow.
They stole his past. Now he's taking back his future. With not yet gone to shit Val Kilmer.
Oh yeah, wow.
Yeah.
What was the movie?
Is he gonna be in the new one?
It was like this, not the Iceman or the Snowman, or it was based on a book. It had the guy who played Magneto.
Ian McKellen or
no,
Magneto?
the younger one.
Michael Fassbender.
Yeah, Fassbender. He plays like a private investigator who's hunting a serial killer called like the Snowman or something like that. And then Val Kilmer is like the old detective, and he showed up and I was like,
"Oh,
wait,
he's
I
in
know."
that.
I'm like, I know who that is, but who is that? Like, it's like racking my brain, and then I shaved the severe jowls off, and I was like, oh my God, that's Iceman.
It's Val.
Oh
Kilmer.
my God, that's Val Kilmer. I don't
know. He went from I'll be your Huckleberry to Huckleberry Hound.
Yeah,
Val Kilmer.
Huckleberry Hound. All right, let's see if this works.
Yeah,
I have to look up Huckleberry Hound. He didn't have jowls, so I'm thinking of a droopy. What's that dog's name? Yeah. It's a terrible impression. Droopy. Is that his name?
Sounds right. That's close.
Oh, sorry, Matt. We went on a segue. When you said Hardwire, I went, that's a good movie name. And so I looked it up, and there's a movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Val Kilmer called Hardwire.
Really? That sounds like a must-watch.
Yeah.
From what was it, 2009 or was it 1990?
2009. Yeah. So Val Kilmer, maybe they used an old picture of Val Kilmer because he looked pretty good.
Was he on the
I
cusp?
feel like in 2009 he did
Well,
not
because he looked okay in
maybe he just had
MacGruber,
moments. Oh, yeah. I forgot about MacGruber.
except he not to bag on the guy because he's obviously gone through some stuff, but he's like a good 75 pounds heavier. He's definitely not getting in the cockpit for Top Gun 2.
Man. Matt, have you seen MacGruber?
No, I haven't.
It's stupid.
Is it stupid? It should be, right?
It's but I loved
amazing.
it. Again, I was high. It's a dumb like probably better as a stoner movie for sure. But at the end, do you care?
No,
I don't think you care what happens. Yeah. So at the end, Val Kilmer's the bad guy, and they're like at a wedding or a funeral or something.
Yeah, he's
and
getting
then
married.
he's getting married, and like Val Kilmer shows up at the end. He like shoots him and like blows him up, and he's falling off a cliff, and he's still shooting at him and like pissing on him as Val Kilmer's falling down a cliff, getting blown up.
Yeah,
it's pretty great.
Like Val Kilmer's getting peed on by MacGruber.
Yeah, like
Well,
while
yeah,
he's
'cause
falling down a
the-
cliff, getting shot and blown up.
Their
and on fire.
origin, their hero villain origin, is that MacGruber was married to a woman who was the bad guy's girlfriend in college. They were roommates in college, and MacGruber stole the wife. So the bad guy killed the original wife, and that's how they became like villain, like protagonist, antagonist type thing. And then at the very, very end, MacGruber marries his sidekick, and they think that the bad guy's dead, but he comes back. And
To ruin the
yeah,
wedding.
he blows him up and he shoots him off a cliff and he's shooting him as he's falling. And then when he hits the bottom, gratuitous splat, and then he unzips his fly and just starts peeing on him from like a 200-foot cliff.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It was what's his name from SNL, right? It was
Will
his
Forte.
character, Will Forte. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, right. There's a scene where, it was Maya Rudolph, his dead wife, and he goes to her grave, and her ghost pops up, and then they start having sex on the grave.
I didn't expect it to be that dirty.
The better part of that is when they cut away to like the caretaker's point of view, and it's just Will Forte like air humping a gravestone.
That's amazing.
Man. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's terribly great.
Yeah, it's a wonderfully stupid.
I'll watch
what
it
you would
after
expect
Parasite.
from Will Forte. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Smart.
It sounds like a second movie of the night type of movie, not one where you settle in.
Right, a good palate cleanser.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Right.
One that if you're tired, you can just kind of turn it off and come back to it later.
Yeah, not something that you have to really invest in.
Right.
No.
Speaking of Parasite,
Yeah. All right. So
Speaking of Oscar movies, we all did our due diligence and watched 1917, directed by Sam Mendes, and really the star of the show, which I would have expected, is Roger Deakins,
absolutely.
Yeah.
the
Oh my goodness.
cinematographer. That is the beauty of this movie, first and foremost.
He's amazing no matter what, but I don't know, man. There's just something about this one, the style of everything. Because Blade Runner 2049 was one of my favorite movies in the last couple of years from a visual standpoint.
Visually, love that movie. Yep.
Which is another movie that he helmed at the camera. So
So yeah, I did a little research. We all watched it. I took notes. I think Matt has notes.
What kind of
Nick,
research?
You remember things? Just some behind the scenes shooting of. Which I don't know if you guys watched any of this of how they made it, which is fascinating.
yeah.
I've only seen a couple of clips. I didn't go too deep because I did a lot of research on this type of stuff for Birdman and for Mother, which is kind of the same. What we're talking about is the continuous shot idea that they're presenting to the viewer that the camera never cuts, that it's one long continuous unbroken shot. In this movie in particular, it's designed to never break the tension for the viewer so that you constantly get berated or besieged by the intensity and the importance of the plot, of the character's plight. And
It's such an
it's super
interesting
good.
way to make a movie. Excuse me. An interesting way to make a war movie. And from a filmmaking perspective, what my least favorite thing in the world is doing a ton of takes and a ton of coverage and then having to go back and just watch it all again. This appealed to me as a filmmaker going, whoa, if you like map, because the prep and the shooting, that's my favorite part.
Right.
So you prep forever and then you shoot a few takes, but they're all long takes like theater. That's exciting to me. That's something that I really want to try now.
Yeah, this one definitely skirted into the theater realm with a lot more early rehearsals. and yeah, so how they did it was, of course it's not one shot, but they would break it down into a series of very long, complicated shots, which, they just kind of go out in the middle of nowhere. And what they did initially, like before building the trenches, before doing any of these things, they would mark out big grid, and they would rehearse with the actors, and the actors would walk, and they would have like this kind of marked out pathway. And from the rehearsing, they would say, "Oh, okay, this shot's gonna take 25 seconds or whatever." And from figuring that out and seeing how fast they move in those 25 seconds, they go, "This is how much set we need to build." So they would try and stay efficient in that way. So it was like the sets were getting built after rehearsal, which is pretty crazy.
Pretty rare.
And
they
were
almost
just out.
shot the movie twice, basically.
Right. And then, of course, like any movie, they're at the whim of Mother Nature. And so everything outside, they're waiting for for cloud cover. So, still all that waiting around. And then I think just even more pressure on, okay, we have these very coordinated shots, all these extras. Everyone has to do the right thing at the right time. And you can't really light it. So Roger Deakins talking about it's daytime. I can't light it in any special way. So because we're going 360 with the camera, and we're
you
moving.
can't have equipment laying around. Yeah.
So what are you doing?
So that was one of my
aside
questions.
From cranes,
do you know? So was there any of the outdoor stuff, especially when they were walking through the trenches? As I was watching, I'm thinking, did they? Because sometimes you'll have a globe light, a big like China ball, basically, but the big ones on a crane, and you can kind of follow with it to sort of create a consistent daylight, or have a whole bunch of flags up of diffusion, so that you kind of get a nice even amount. Was there anything like that, or were they just completely going natural light?
I wasn't seeing it. In what I was seeing, it was all natural light. The only time there was real lighting effect was when he's running through that city at night, kind of like when he sees that woman when he runs down into that basement. That's about the only time. They used fake flares that they've carefully mapped out, and also the burning building. He had just a big flood of lights coming to create, the light on the actors from the opposite side. That was about it. It seemed like everything else. And Deakins himself said, I can't put lights here, so it's just we just have to wait till Mother Nature does its thing.
It's crazy, but it's crazy how much he does do in camera. Being a cinematographer since the 60s or so, he's made so much. He's made so many movies in so many ways that he's still, even with Blade Runner, he was still using just sort of existing and practical lights and things like that. That's what makes him really unique, is he can be very, very precise, even in the most imprecise sort of circumstances. And that's one of the reasons why I love him. Like Big Lebowski, visually is one of the most interesting comedies you'll ever watch, because of just the tone of the movie, the color of the movie, the interesting nature of the shots, and the slow motion things, the bowling montages and sequences, how precise the action was with getting people to do every movement right when as the camera passes, things like that. I mean, he's sort of a director. I mean, he calls himself cinematographer, but he is like almost a second director in a way, because of the camera. His camera is telling a story in a way that a lot of movies aren't. No Country for Old Men is a great example of that. The camera almost feels like a character in that movie, even though it's not a first person, even though it's not long takes. The very beginning, when Josh Brolin's looking through the binoculars and he sees the dog kind of flipping away, and those long vista shots, things like that, he somehow creates the camera truly is your POV as an audience member, and I think that's what makes him really unique.
Right. Yeah, he can hit if you want to be an intimate feeling, like you're saying. No Country for Old Men feels very small. It feels very like, yeah, you're in it. Yeah. This movie feels, of course, big, but again, yeah, it places you in the action a little more. And certainly, all in all, it works. I think that's the one thing going into it. You kind of go, is this going to feel gimmicky? Is it going to feel like, okay? Yeah. But it works fine. You know, I think it's successful.
I only had a couple of points of contention with it, really.
Uh-oh.
Well, no, they're not bad. I mean,
I've got issues myself. That's fine.
Yeah, it's got my biggest one was
I didn't. It's perfect. I'm kidding.
Well, it's perfect. The end.
I love the single take because I love what it does to you as a viewer, like keeping you in it, right on the edge, that kind of thing. It was great in Birdman because I don't want to say that was the first time it was ever done, but I would say that's probably one of the best examples of the early use of it in a small, or
at least
space.
An American movie.
Yeah. At least in a common American mainstream type thing, and then Darren Aronofsky used it in Mother. But the point of using it in Mother was to remove time. So he has stuff that happens in split seconds, which would take weeks to develop. He has like a phone call that results in 200 people walking through the front door, kind of stuff. So his use of the no cut, that's just what I'm calling it, is to remove time. So you're discombobulated completely about what's happening and have no idea what's going on. My one hiccup with 1917 is the dark scene where he gets shot. It's not a spoiler; it's in the trailer. So he gets shot, and they cut the camera for 30 seconds of pitch black, which for me that was the biggest issue I had with it, because up until that point they had been using the long take to develop like we gotta go, we cannot wait, there is no stopping, must go, and then even to the point of when they're in the farmhouse, and without giving away what happens, the plane crashes, but then he gets picked up by a series of like a small company. The timing of that is impossible.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
right. So that's like the Aronofsky type use of like, I'm going to use a single cut with no time, so you lose track of time there. But then when they did the solid cut to black when he got shot, and then he wakes up, you're like, because you've already messed with time, was he out for 5 minutes or is he out for like 6 hours? And if the whole point of this movie is to get a message somewhere as fast as possible, when you remove the element of time to a black screen, that was my just like, I don't know why this is here.
The thing is, you kind of had
it was too long
to a certain extent because the movie couldn't be 12 hours long. So there was there had to be some time passage that we had to not be a part of, and it had to be that sleep. What it did for me as just someone who was immersed in the film was it made me incredibly nervous because of that. Sure. How long was he asleep?
Sure.
What time is it? Like, what's going on? How much time does he have left? That was, I think, so it served its purpose in that respect, but I totally see what you're saying. The only hiccup I had was what you had already just said, was the bit where that company shows up and all of a sudden there's Mark Strong standing above him going, "Hello, soldier, what are you doing here?" It was weird to me because it was like, here's a soldier dying basically, and there's this whole company rolling up and you don't hear the trucks, and I was just, if the idea was here's a guy who is completely immersed in his moment, then I get it, but it also felt a little too unrealistic and coincidental. Like, is he in a dream? Like, what's going on? I didn't quite get what was happening in that moment.
Oh yeah, that whole scene for me, and if we want to go through plot by point kind of, but yeah, that whole scene, the airplane, them going to the house in the first place, all of that just felt kind of silly and contrived. I went, So I think that was the weakest part in terms of plot. Everything else that happens, you go, okay, I can buy it. I can buy. Because the whole thing, we start out, you two need to pass through no man's land. You need to pass past what a lot of people still think the German lines are. And then you need to get off past the countryside, through a city, and then get over to the other side and stop a giant attack from happening where 1,600 men are going to walk into a German trap. And so with that assignment, I go, okay, these two characters now need to do everything they can to just stay out of the way of trouble and keep moving forward, right?
Right. Avoid confrontation, avoid blockage.
Avoid any circumstance. And so it sets up this rule of like, okay, if they do something dumb and unnecessary, you're going to lose me. And so that scene when they went into the house, I was like, you lost me. You guys are already doing something that you don't have to do. This giant open field. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe just because it was sort of this moment where they because they didn't really have any food and water, so they thought, let's go grab some provisions, right? That was the motivation behind it, wasn't it?
I guess, yeah.
I don't remember if that's explicitly said. You could logically make that leap though. Yeah. And like the audience, we're dancing around a very spoilery topic. But
I think we can presume that if you're listening,
so we pop it out.
Spoilers are going to happen.
Yeah, we're into spoilers for sure.
Yeah. All right, so this is the spoiler break. The trailer ruined it. the trailer tells you what happens, and like the kid who needs to get there for his brother isn't in half of the trailers,
and he's not really he's not the main guy on the poster. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so he dies. In the stupidest way possible.
Right.
He dies.
With this Deus Ex Machina of an airplane falling out of the sky.
You didn't like that? I thought that was amazing.
No, it's not that it didn't look good, but I thought story structure wise, I thought it was lazy and stupid, and like they didn't know what else to do. So I went, let's have a dogfight, and then a German plane just comes out of the blue because we got to kill this kid off.
Yeah,
and we'll just have them try and save the German instead of shoot him, and then all of a sudden the kid gets stabbed or shot. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because when they pulled him from the plane and they were putting him out, my eye, it was probably on purpose. My eye went right to that dagger that was flopping around on the ground right next to the pilot. I'm like, someone's got to take that knife away from him. Right. And then the one guy leaves to get water, and then sure enough, he turns around and his buddy stabbed in the gut. I was like, come on. Like
I didn't expect it at all. I didn't expect it. I was just like watching the movie. Like, they saved him. What a good guys.
I was waiting for the kid to die because, like I said, from all the trailers, there's all the stuff you could tell are like the really important scenes, like him running across the battle lines. That one kid was all by himself.
Yeah.
So 2 men enter, 1 man leave, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I knew it was going to happen, and I knew that it wasn't going to be. Like those scenes weren't pre-scenes. I knew those were like denouement type stuff. Like those are end scenes where that soldier has taken upon himself to fulfill the task, even though it's not his brother. So that initial scene is great when they're just like sitting next to 2 trees, and some guy comes over and kicks his boot and says, "Grab somebody, you have a mission." And he just like wakes him up and he's like, "Hey," he's like, "Oh man, all right." So already like I'm out. But then, like, yeah, it's a great character story. But I thought there's a better way they could have to kill the brother. But then, yeah, that whole scene is just like this weird, compact little area. And then, yeah, the timing was that company following the airplanes, but they make no mention of it. And there's no like, hey, there's a downed plane over there. Like, there's none of that. They're on the road.
I
and
understand
there's like
that
20 of them.
It was more World War I was a lot more compartmentalized in the battles and then in the aerial battles, because that was such a new part of war that there might have been an issue where 2 planes were out doing reconnaissance and ran into a German plane, so thus they started fighting. I think that there are constraints that happen within just filmmaking in general, where it's like, should we make an entire massive airplane battle happen above them yes, it'll take us 6 more months, or we just do these 3 planes and make it simpler. So there's those sorts of things as well. But I guess maybe just the sort of isolation of war and the futility of war is sort of what I took from that moment, from that particular chunk of time in the film, where he's chosen to do a mission to go save his brother. He saves his friend's life in the process by pulling him out of rubble after the explosion in the barracks down below.
Yeah,
and
German barracks.
Yeah, and they're
Right.
still on their way to fulfill this like massive mission, and then he gets stabbed in the stomach and dies from bleeding. I think that's just the awfulness of the truth of war. Band of Brothers, I read the book before I watched the series. It's an amazing book.
Yeah.
But you know how many guys died in car accidents after the war was over while they were waiting to go home?
Oh, sure.
A lot. And it happened all the time. Or in Korea and Vietnam, same thing. Guys died in helicopter crashes on their way home. So I think that was just part of it. Is like I could have gone the route of being like, ugh, that's no way to go. But it was like, yeah, that's what sucks about war. People die in the worst circumstances, even when they're trying to help the enemy.
Sure. Right. And it's not that he died in like this kind of like crappy moment, because that's true. People die in very unremarkable moments, and war certainly ups that ante. And so a lot of people are going to die in just like really crummy, awful ways. It doesn't have to be a giant, in the middle of, D-Day invasion. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that scale. It can just be, some random thing. And like that story of the guy did he get a medal because his ear got bit off by a rat or something? That's kind of a cute story.
He said he got
leading up to
shrapnel
it.
or whatever, but it was really a rat. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it was, his lady sent him perfume or lotion or something, oil for his hair, lathered his head up, went to sleep, wakes up, a rat's licking his ear.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sounds nice.
But yeah, so to go through this though, I feel like, so that's a little bit later, but like the opening with them walking through the trench is like wonderful and remarkable, because it just feels like endless miles of frontline trench,
right?
And endless soldiers. And I don't know how they did this, how many extras are like, we're here in this scene, now we run around the backside to get over here so that when the camera comes again, now we're new soldiers. I don't know how much of that's happening. All that coordinating is fascinating, but end of the day, those shots look awesome. The camera's kind of rolling around them. It's in front of them at times, and then it's behind them, and so the claustrophobia just moving through the trenches I thought was gorgeous. And especially what I thought right off really effective is they get told by the general, they're given their mission, and the general's like, don't worry, you can cross no man's land, it's fine, the Germans are gone, they're not there anymore.
Right.
And so they're like, oh, okay. And the younger the guy with the brother's like, hey, we're cool, man, it's fine, let's just go do it. And the other dude's like, what are you talking about? We need to wait till it's dark.
Right.
And so I like that, the beginning of that tension build up, and the two of them kind of at odds, where of course the one with the brother's like, who cares, let's just go.
Right.
And the other guy's being like, hey, if we get killed, then we fail, you get it?
Right.
So I like that
Yep.
conflict between them. But then as they're moving down the trenches and they're getting further along, they're getting closer to the front line and closer to no man's land, to where they get to that last troop, and they find, I don't know, some corporal, I can't remember who it is, that's just like, you're gonna do what? And this guy's like very dressed down, he's got his uniform jacket on open, he's chill, and you can tell they've just been battered, and he's like, you're gonna go do what? Okay, you're both gonna die, here, have a flare.
Yeah.
And,
my favorite part of that exchange was if you get shot, just leave it right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, or if you get shot, throw it back towards us, isn't
Right.
it? Like, can you throw it back this way?
Yeah, it's something like that.
I really
us out.
like it. I don't
Yeah.
want it falling into the hands of the Germans. Like that's
Right. It's like, we need this thing. And it's like, there's a couple dead horses. Behind the second dead horse, you'll see a guy leaned over. That's you can pop through.
That they
you
had
can
a
get
nickname
through
for it. I don't
the
remember what it
barbed
was,
wire.
but
Yeah.
fun nickname for him.
But that beginning, when they're moving up and moving through no man's land, I mean, all that's like gorgeous. It's great, and the tension is there, and they're jumping through the, kind of jumping down into holes here and there, kind of blast craters, full of water. There's gross things everywhere, and yeah, as they head up to that the German side of the German trench, it's I think all that stuff is wonderful.
I think so from me having such limited knowledge of set decoration or set building, all of that trench area, I mean, do you suppose that for the sandbags they just created like a mold? Did they do it out of styrofoam? Like, how did they? Because I mean, it was a massive expanse.
They could have.
Did they just reuse?
They could have used like the insulation foam stuff that like the liquid foam that they pump in it. Oh no, get
like
actual
expanding
burlap.
Foam.
Yeah, like expanding foam. Just get actual burlap, and then just fire it in there because it'll expand out and it'll look like it's full of sand. You can kind of shape it when it's still a little squishy, but then it weighs almost nothing. So you can set it up, move it around, and you're not lugging around these like 45-pound sandbags. I doubt they would have gone through the effort of creating like an entire mold shop and then casting it all and then painting it. And I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look, but that wouldn't be the way I would tackle it.
I mean, if they would have too, you have to remember it's probably just surface. It's like how you look at a brick building nowadays, and it's just a facade and it's not full.
Yeah,
brick.
that's kind of what I figured.
It's probably
either way though. I mean, the trenches,
like
the set design, and set decoration, all of that was brilliant. But the trenches in particular were just so perfectly made, and that whole. Because sometimes the camera was POV a little bit, ish of the characters, and as they're going through the area approaching the no man's land portion, the guys kind of hunkered down inside of there, inside the trench a little bit. It was really really beautifully done, but not overly done. Didn't feel like they went to this crazy extent to make it seem disgusting, but they just wanted it to look miserable.
There's stuff. I mean, the guy gets the hand guts early on. Yeah, I mean,
I want to talk about that moment.
He loses that hand. FYI.
Oh, you mean the hand in the barbed wire?
Yeah, he gets like cut on something, and then he
gets barbed wired
through a cadaver. Just
yeah.
And
I did laugh. I don't know if anyone else laughed.
That was my first thought. Was you just got dead
Yeah.
guts into your hand wound, bro.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're gonna lose that
Good
hand.
luck
buddy.
with that.
The thing I noticed too, comparing and contrasting the different use of the one cut film, is like in this one I noticed a lot of stuff too where the camera wasn't always on a character's face.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of times where they were walking, and the camera stayed at an even plane, but then like they would go up a hill and then down a hill, and you would just see like their boots, or they would dip underneath the line of sight, which I thought was interesting because it happened a couple of times.
Yeah, not like I
didn't know if those
it,
were
but...
clever ways of doing like. Well, that's that. You remember last week I talked about not going into a movie looking for things.
Right. Yeah.
When I saw this movie, I couldn't not do it. I was always looking for the edit. I was always looking for the cut point where they chose to use something to allow for a clean edit,
but in a fun way.
Which is probably why they did it really well. But I think that's probably why like the cut to black really bothered me. Because that was like, oh, you guys worked so hard everywhere else.
I 100% felt that way exactly because it was this fun game within the movie. It didn't take you out of the movie, like looking for the glass of water or whatever that is half full and then it's half empty. But so you're not really looking for it to make it to ruin it, but you're looking for it because it was so interesting. Because I think that there was even a moment where they're in the trenches and they're following the guys. The guys stop. The camera kind of comes around and drops down to this soldier who's smoking a pipe. But the camera passes behind his legs, and that was a moment of transition where they cut because the precise moment of the camera passing by the leg kind of creates this body wipe, and then if they just do it again on action, there you are. You're on that scene now. And so that's a scene cut. It was brilliant. And then the fall asleep, darkness, and the water, which here's the thing. After a while, like when he falls into the river, you just have to, like, we can't do body wipes for 2.5 hours. Like, we just can't do it.
Yeah.
So we have to come up with other ways to break it, but also make super clean breaks that you as a filmmaker and a film crew don't have to constantly be matching shots, because that creates a level of exhaustion that I think will just kill you. So
oh yeah, well then you're just gonna get into like, that's another rock, oh there's another rock,
well and speaking of rocks,
rock.
that moment that you were just talking about, because the camera did kind of sometimes stay level, or as they went up it kind of pulled to the side, so they're going up a hill, camera's to the side, and it stays on the other side of the hill, because then they come down, and then it's that wide open expanse with like the trees that are all burned out. That was a really cool transition point too, because that's an easy cut. You just move the camera at the same pace and then just match the frame, and now you're on a new scene. So those sorts of things were, even though that one was a little bit easier than say like a body wipe cut, that was still really cool. And I love that moment because he said we're approaching no man's land, take cover, and then the camera comes up and there's literally no cover. It's just 2 or 3 burned out trees, and that's about it.
And they did a great job too of matching keeping the dialogue long enough so that it wasn't like two-word phrases. It was like they're telling stories, so you can have the audio file play constant and basically match up and help you match up that transitional cut. So if you're listening to the story, you don't see the camera cut.
Well, that's
they did that a lot, which is really good.
The craziest thing about filmmaking is what goes into, for one, the sound design. And that doesn't just mean the effects, the quality and cleanliness of the dialogue. It's how the sound moves you between camera cuts. And so if we're just having a conversation, very rarely will camera A stay on you until you're done with your sentence, and then go to me at the beginning of my sentence, and then go back to you at the beginning of your sentence. It's always overlapping dialogue, because otherwise the visual cut and the audio cut starts to get real jittery. And so that's one of the things that is the unsung hero in pretty much every film, is that sound, or in the case of 1917, the lack of sound. So the moment where one of the characters is dying, it's so silent and so quiet and so isolating that you get completely disoriented until suddenly there's a whole company of soldiers there. And so that's
in trucks.
In trucks. In trucks you didn't hear. But that's the magic of film, where they created such an isolated feeling of sound, like it was almost as if the sound was being sucked out of the movie. That is even part of it that is fascinating to me, and something that it takes a master to be able to just create the world, to feel that isolated and that alone.
I think that's one thing.
It's a great film
too. And again, it's really just, I think it's just that little section where the kid dies. That's the only time where I kind of go, I just wasn't a fan of how they, what the story was doing. Where two, it's like once that kid dies, I feel like there was an opportunity for that guy who didn't want to do this, who kind of got pulled into it because the kid just happened to choose him, not knowing what the mission was going to be. And they just had this conversation back where it's like, that dude almost dies. He's temporarily blinded because of this explosion he's in. And he's just like, why did you choose me, man? What's going on? I don't want to be here. And the kid's like, well, then go back. I'm going to go. And it's like, oh, fine, I'm coming. And so all that happens. And then his friend dies. And he's sitting there, and I kind of would have maybe liked that moment of him going, well, all right, here I am. What do I do now? I got to keep moving forward, before, where I feel like when the company just shows up, it takes away that moment for that character to kind of go, what do I do now? Okay, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm deciding to do this for my friend who's now dead. And now I have a true reason and mission to do it, which he still has because his friend dies.
It could have been a scenario too where they were thinking about doing like a very cliched like crossroads type scene where he then walks back out to the road, and let's say that the company of soldiers didn't show up, and he walks back out to that main road and does that like very boring, like look left, that's where I was supposed to be going, and then look right, back to safety. Maybe that was something that they had tinkered with and just said, instead of us doing that, let's use some other
just move it
literal vehicle to move it along. So to take that away from it, so you don't get that, because you don't want to make him seem not courageous, especially at that time. You don't want to take away or add any sort of like cowardice or potential cowardice to that, especially if he's going to fulfill the rest of the story. So I'm assuming there were discussions about that, but the speed at which that occurred was a little crazy. Yeah.
Right. And I get, too, I think this is probably a movie where, because I think Mendez wrote it himself. I might be wrong.
He had a co-writer as well.
Believe so, yeah.
Okay, yeah. We're like bringing in an airplane. I feel like there's certain things where he's like they didn't bring in a tank, but I feel like he's trying to bring various aspects of the war into this movie where he can, where as much as it makes sense, right? So it's like, did he need planes? No, he didn't have to have planes, but of course that's an aspect of the war, so of course let's add in planes. Let's do this, let's do that. Let's bring variety so it's not just guys walking through trenches and then out in the middle of nowhere.
I know to a certain extent, though, that the story was based upon some of the stories that he had heard growing up, because his grandfather was in World War I, and so I think that I think what would be fun is to dig in, find out exactly what was real and what wasn't, and I think we'd be surprised. You'd probably say, "Oh no, the airplane and the German stabbing the soldier, that's real, but the barracks collapsing isn't." You know, something like that, where you'd be surprised at what is the real stuff. You're like, "Well, that sucks." Yeah.
Sure, it could be. I mean, from what Mendez said, it's pretty much sounded like he's like, yeah, he was a messenger. And so that was a jumping off point.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it sounded like everything was BS beyond, my grandpa did a thing.
Yeah.
And so we're going to kind of riff off of it. But, it's fine.
I think one of the things, too, that was so amazing about the movie was the color, just the way that the movie looked. In terms of the color grading was just crazy.
It's great.
It was so rich yet so extremely drab in the best of ways. Yeah, the color palette, I guess you could say, of the whole film was just beautiful. And then you had that one moment where he runs into E or F or G company, whoever is the last wave of the attack, and they kind of found this nice patch of land to have their church service under. And it was like he walks into Galadriel's forest for a brief second, and then he realizes this isn't where I belong. I need to get back into hell. And so that was a nice break in the color and the drab to be able to go and see. But you also saw a transition. You went from the horrific nature of the British front into the just completely shelled out no man's land into the British. And so you're kind of transitioning into greener fields that have not been overrun and completely, destroyed by war, which I thought was a cool way to take the audience through a journey.
Sure, yeah, as you're moving through the French countryside. Yep. And then you're even seeing cattle just hanging out, grazing. Yeah. Where they are.
Yeah,
no one's killed
just
them.
doing their thing.
Yeah.
There were some nice little moments in that respect to create that sense of humanity too, where it said, why are they killing all the cows? And they said, well, they kill the cows because if they don't, we'll eat them. They can be food. So they're systematically destroying the food sources along the way as the British advance to try to mitigate the number of soldiers that are going to be there to get them. And also on the color front too, I don't know how you guys watched the movie. I watched it on iTunes, rented it on iTunes from my computer. But then I run an HDMI from my graphics card into my 4K TV, and it looked great, and the color was great, and the contrast in the dark moments, I could see everything. One of the things that people complain about a lot, and my TV is not an expensive TV by any stretch of the imagination, is when you're watching streaming things like Game of Thrones and darker movies, that you can't see anything. And it's true when especially if you're running it off of Wi-Fi or running it off of the cable going in. So I don't know what iTunes is doing differently, and especially because I didn't pull it off of like Apple TV or anything like that. It's right from my graphics card up, which obviously displays things. It can display things all the way up to 6K, but I was kind of surprised that the color, the contrast, everything was so spot on from iTunes rather than. But when I watched Game of Thrones off of HBO Go, and it was streaming right in, like hardwired into the internet. I couldn't see half the last season because it was all just dark and mushed out. And I tried every setting on my TV.
Sure.
I was just like trying to find the right setting to make it work, and it just didn't work. But I don't know if you guys had a similar good experience or not so.
For this movie, I went just through Comcast, but that was the same. Yeah, certainly that Game of Thrones, the Dark Knight or whatever it was called, that episode. That one I definitely had to block like every light that existed aside from the TV, and I just sat in complete darkness as much as I could, and it was whatever. It was still hard to see.
Yeah.
This I didn't have that problem. But also, there wasn't enough happening. You know, I could follow what was happening in this movie because it was only dedicated moments in the movie where it happened, and I'm like, he's running around, he's being chased and shot at. I get it, you know. So I didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
But I saw it in a theater.
You saw it in the theater, yeah. So in theory, it should be properly corrected and broadcast and all that.
No, but I could see how there are trends where certain movies are coming out where, specifically Game of Thrones, watching that. I mean, I watched that live on TV, and when it was time to watch it, it was like, turn off every light. Don't even attempt to watch this during the day. Because for whatever reason, it's pitch black. So whether that was source, whether that was reproduction, however it got to us, it's
reproduction, because I've read articles about that scene in particular, and I mean the painstaking lengths that cinematographers go through to get things perfect and perfectly dialed in on camera. I don't know how they shot it or what they shot it on, but I guess it was one of those scenes that they were particularly proud of on the show, and then they broadcasted it, and like the internet blew up, and they were just like, thanks for giving us a black screen. And so but the thing is, I mean, when your TV's $200, $400, $600, while that doesn't seem like a small amount of money, it's just the technology that's in it is just going to be different in the way that it broadcasts. I mean, George Lucas tried to change all of this before we even had HD with THX, and he tried to sort of standardize how movies were supposed to be watched at home, which, looking back at it, is kind of comical because we were using VHS tapes at the time, and that was a pretty limiting thing. But for him, a lot of it was the sound, though, too, where he wanted to create a proper sound experience at home and in movie theaters. So there still is that to a certain extent, but digital technology is just way too open a platform, and there's just no way that you're going to have the correct way of doing things unless you have the knowledge. It's the same thing with our audio recording. The only reason I figured out what was going on with how so for those listening still, you're welcome. We, for the longest time, I've been talking into my microphone, and the guys hear my voice rather than my normal voice. They hear, like this, it's very slow and sloppy. And the reason is because I had my output from my audio recorder at the wrong frequency. So I had to match it up with the frequency of my computer. Problem solved. It's the same thing. The color correction, the way that it's outputting is not in sync with your TV. So now you've got a black ball of mush that you're watching rather than a really perfectly dialed.
Well, even then, I mean, these TVs comes with like settings. So if you've manually tinkered with the settings, I mean, nobody calibrates a show before they watch every show. Right. You just turn your TV on, watch my show. Nobody's going through doing a color calibration or anything. So who knows? I mean, I think the TV I'm looking at has like 6 settings, but they're all stupidly labeled like cinema, TV,
sports.
Live, sports, like games. So it's like just these generic, like high pass, low pass, extra black, low saturation, high saturation, all that kind of stuff that they're just like these comical settings. But right now I think it's just on like normal. Yeah. Because, again, I don't calibrate before everything I watch. It's just that's what it is. And your eye is going to settle into it anyway. Yeah. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Well, now and then now with 4K TVs, and if you have this sped up frame rate thing, and so you can watch an old movie and you're going, oh, it looks like a Geico commercial, because now they're cramming 50 frames a second into what was shot as 24 frames a second.
And that's the most brutal thing when you see somebody watching something at that high frame rate, like so the TV's set on that high frame rate, which is usually what it comes at out of factory.
It's factory.
That and then also with the captions on, and then you just see someone watching a movie at 100 megahertz and with the captions on, just like, I can't help you. Like, I didn't like it. It's like, well, yeah, of course, because you didn't watch it right.
You had a bad experience watching this movie.
Yeah, technology screwed you. It's like, I go to a bar and I'm sitting there and I'm kind of stuck. Like, oh, here's the TV, and it'll be like one of the newer, one of the Star Trek movies, Beyond, I think, was playing. And two, when it's the fast frame rate, when you're seeing in action scenes are comical.
Yeah,
they look horrible at that setting, because they're pulling out frames. The editors are pulling out frames to make punches faster and kicks and all the choreography move really quick. And when you see it in that format, it looks laughable. It looks so awful.
Yeah. Well, it looks like Doctor Who. It looks not real. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks completely fake.
So, Nico,
maybe in the future.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, maybe in the future it'll be like, oh, you're about to watch The Good Place. Would you like to click the button to set it to the proper settings for the best version of The Good Place versus you're gonna watch Goodfellas? Here, let's give you this frame rate, these are the settings.
Would you like the Good Place settings for Goodfellas?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Great Balls of Fire?
I was going to ask Nico, what did 1917 get in the mind of Nico gut reaction?
I think it was a 5 out of 5 for sure.
Because Oscar contender.
So I definitely thought it should win for cinematography, just because I know how hard that one cut, one shot type thing is to accomplish. But also, I thought the concept of the story, whether it was, I didn't look it up, whether it was true or false, whether it was nonfiction or fiction, I just thought the story was phenomenal. So it thought, in order to write a story of that type, and then have the vision to be like, we're going to do this in one take, effectively, that does change the writing. Like, that it changes conversation, it changes conversation length. You can't have, like you were saying, if they were gridding out how long it takes them to walk a certain distance, you can't have some guy go on this like 5-paragraph tirade when it takes him 5 seconds to walk up the ladder. It's that kind of stuff that just, for me, it was an extra level of like, this is definitely a 5 out of 5, win an award type thing, beyond the nomination, win an award.
Which it did. It won Best Cinematographer to the Deeks. And
did he get it? Yeah. I didn't watch any of the Oscars.
Yeah, he did. Okay. Yeah.
What Sam Mendes, did he win for director, or did he win for? He won for best director, didn't he? Oh,
did he?
Hold on.
I don't know if they won.
I have the list in front of me, but I just don't.
I got it.
I feel like I saw him on the podium that night.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, Parasite won.
Yeah, I'm looking him. So 1917 won sound mixing and cinematography and visual effects.
Okay. Interesting.
Which makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, the effects were seamless. Who knows what was practical and what was CG. I mean, that was kind of the cool thing.
Yeah,
only jumping into the water. That's the only part where you're like, clearly that's
What
CG,
is the deal with
else.
falls? Why do falls look fake even if they're real? Why is that?
Because you just know it didn't happen. You know what I mean? It's like, you see a dinosaur, you go, oh, did they find a real, it's the same level.
Did they find a real
they didn't actually do that shot.
Yeah.
And if they do, then you've heard about that they did that as a stunt.
True.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, I think I saw a clip on how they shot the very last, not going to say the very last scene, but the scene where he's running across the front line. And it's interesting the amount of like green screen materials that they leave out there. So I think we were talking about lighting earlier. I think they did have some greened out lighting, but it was also then masking like all the little explosion pots that they were using. But the funny part about that scene in particular is I think the actor was on, I think he was either on Fallon or Conan, and he was talking about how the scene that they ended up using in the final cut of the movie is an outtake, because he runs into 3 separate extras, and one of them was supposed to happen, but the second and third one were absolutely not supposed to happen, and you can tell too because the camera doesn't stop moving, but the second guy like takes him out.
Obliterated, yeah.
And the camera can't stop because all those extras are on a timer, you know, go one, go one, go one. So they're going, so the actor, you can see him get wiped out, and he actually looks at the extra like, bro. and then he tries to then catch back up to the camera. But I think while it was an outtake, it was so good because it's that sense of like time's not stopping because you did.
Yeah.
You know, I think it was like those total serendipitous accident type things where it's like they could have timed that perfectly and he could have just been like a smooth Tom Cruise the whole time. But the one bump and then the guy just lays him out.
Right. Just
and
chaos.
Like,
right.
Oh, yeah. It's so good. It ended up being so good.
I'll admit I laughed when they happened, but I agree. I think it was a good
100%.
shot for them.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to be a jerk that I laughed.
Yeah, no, it was
I
definitely
laughed.
funny because
Can't change what you are.
you can see it. You can see
true.
the actor. He's
I am a jerk.
running, and they've done enough of that rehearsal that he knows that there's going to be guys in front of him.
Right.
But he's got that look on his face like, that guy's a little too close. And then he wipes him out, and he literally does give him like the bro. And then he keeps
It was great though because
It's like-
I thought it was like when I saw it, I was like, I mean, they went for it because you don't usually see principal actors going for it like that.
Right.
You'll see the stuntman do it, but you don't usually see like the main star like really go for it. And I was just like, I'm impressed, man. Like they went for it. Like it looked real.
heck yeah.
Like they really ran into each other. Apparently they did.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
He totally laid him out. Yeah.
And also, I think, well, the fact that they're not giant name actors, you know, they're kind of thrown into it as quote unquote nobodies, right? So we're not going, oh, look, it's Tom Cruise on this journey through World War One. That mixed with the complexity of the choreography of doing these long, complex shots, and oh, we have a shady moment, the cloud cover, you know, like the odds are so like stacked against you to
Right,
get that
and
perfect
just
shot
go.
that it's just like everyone just had to be like, yeah.
Which is why
regimented.
I loved the cameo nature of some of the actors being in there. With, I mean, some of my favorite actors, kind of from the whole from the British Isles, you know, with Colin Firth playing the general, was just killer because basically you just get one. I mean, he did multiple takes, I'm sure. But it's like, but here's your scene.
Couple
You
days.
get, maybe 2, but maybe just one day. Here it is. And then same thing with Benedict, which is fantastic to see. But my favorite was Mark Strong because he got a couple of moments.
That was a great character.
Great character. No close-ups. Nothing to feature him. You really actually couldn't even tell it was him other than his voice for the first 10 minutes that he was in the movie.
Right.
Because you knew it. You knew it the
Yeah,
second
because
it
it's
was
just
him.
like a body walking up like waist down.
Yeah.
Right? That's how he's introduced.
And then it was these
It's
big
just like,
wide
oh, here's this
shots
person.
of them walking up the motorcade
Yep.
the whole time, and you know it's him because it's Mark Strong's amazing voice. But I mean that is so. I think I love actors like that who don't care. They don't need to be the main focus. They love a movie like that because they can just bring the character, and there's no super ultra close up. There's nothing like that. There's no coverage. You're just in theater, and most of these guys are theater actors anyways. Most of them are from the Royal Shakespeare Company anyway, so they prefer it like that. Yeah.
Well, in Cumberbatch too, one of his and it stood out distinctly on this point is one of his lines I feel like was in the trailer was like, "This war will come down to last man standing," or whatever he says. And when he says that in the movie, he's blurred and the focus is pulled on the main actor character guy.
Right.
And so he's not even in focus in that moment.
Yeah.
It's like, that's nice.
I love that collaborative nature of the film. But when you focus on two actors who nobody knows, that was where like I didn't Saving Private Ryan, love it, great movie, Tom Hanks,
Sure.
National Treasure, too famous. Matt Damon, even at that point in time, was probably a little too famous, and also also really way too famous now. So there's certain things, but what's weird is like Nathan Fillion's in that movie too, and he has this little bit part, but he looks a little,
Yep.
he looks enough not like him. Tom, or what's his name? Sam
Vin
from
Diesel?
Cheers. Oh yeah, Vin Diesel. Yeah. Ted Danson is in it for a hot second.
Ted Danson. Yep.
Oh, is he? I forgot.
Yeah, he's in the
Yeah, he
scene with
plays
Nathan Fillion.
Colonel or something.
He's the
Yeah.
one who kind of walks him over to talk to who they think Private Ryan is first.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, I guess the point being that star power is wonderful, and you come to trust it, but sometimes it distracts you out of the realism of the movie. But that's what was great about 1917. That didn't happen with these guys. I wasn't blown
Right.
off by Benedict Cumberbatch being the colonel at the end or whatever his rank was.
Yeah, I
thought
think
that
it was
cool.
just because it was good casting choices. It's not like they had. I'm trying to think of like the most ridiculous example I can think of. It's not like they had Will Ferrell pop up.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
That would have been great.
Benedict, Colin, Mark Strong. Those make sense.
Well, and they've also already done. He was in Cumberbatch was in Warhorse or something. So it's like this is already ground that's been covered by
Established,
at least
yeah,
him.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like it was good casting of star power. It wasn't, yeah, like I said, they didn't choose some totally out of place person to make. It wasn't truly a cameo.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Right.
it was a small character spot
Yeah.
that just happened to be fulfilled by a fairly A to B list person.
Well, and importantly, it's upper ranks people,
Right.
which I think
Yeah,
also
which makes
maybe
sense.
helps.
oh yes, also that, right? It's not like they had his buddy, and it's Tom Cruise. He like kicks the guy, and it's
Tom Cruise
You're
is
like,
the other
well,
private.
okay,
Right,
he
yeah.
lives and the other kid dies.
Yeah.
That's how this works.
Right.
Yeah, there's none of that.
Yeah.
Right. And I like that they set up in this movie that the colonel might not want to stop this push. He
Right.
might not want to stop it.
Yeah.
Once you get there, I don't know if it's Strong or who it is.
Yeah,
I think it's
Mark
Strong.
Strong's
Who's like,
character, yeah.
make sure there are witnesses when you talk to the colonel. Because sometimes people don't want to listen.
Yeah.
Whatever the line is. And that's like a great little seed planted. That's like, he's going to go on this crazy journey to try and stop this thing. And once he gets there, he might fail because the colonel doesn't want to listen to him.
Yeah, he'll hear you, but it's happening anyway. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that moment of relenting
so-
that he had though on his face was a pretty stellar moment of acting, where he goes from being, hey, the battle already started, sorry, we're doing this thing, to realizing that this is a trap. All right, call them all back. I was like, wow, he's a good actor.
Right.
They should have just let him
Benner-
have his British
Benner
accent.
diddle cumble bottles.
Yeah, should have let him have his accent for Doctor Strange. Don't you think? I mean, I know he's supposed to be an American, but it got a little. He's one of the best actors I think.
When you
of
know
all time.
better, it's always
yeah. And
tough.
when he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
"I'm
yeah.
Doctor Stephen Strange," and he's just really trying to throw
All right,
those
that's-
R's in.
that's
I was
fair.
like,
Yeah.
we should just let him be British.
Mm-hmm.
What's gonna happen? We had. I was gonna call her Thandie Newton. It wasn't Thandie Newton.
Oh,
It
an
was
Australian Thor.
Tilda Swinton playing the
right.
Chinese.
Yeah, it's
Old
a superhero
Chinese guy,
movie.
so,
Nobody
I mean,
cares.
We're
you
gonna
know,
get
it's
mad
like-
at Doctor
yeah.
Strange suddenly being British. I don't think so, especially if it makes it feel more
Right,
natural.
exactly. Thor's Australian. Nobody cares.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Right.
So yeah,
But his pecs are juicy.
right. Well, there we go.
cares?
1917. 5 out of 5 stars.
1917. Yeah.
My one last little dig at 1917.
Oh boy, just kidding.
No, and it's not. It's
That's
not
okay.
1917.
I'm seeing if I have any
Get it.
others.
And it's a dig, but it's great on Sam Mendes because 1917 won the Golden Globe for Best Picture.
Did it?
However, it did. However, the Golden
It
Globes.
hadn't come out yet.
That's correct. The 1917 had been released in like Screener and whatever, but it had not been commercially released yet. And Sam Mendes did the most amazing thing ever. He basically got up there and said, I know a lot of you have not seen my movie, and I know that me winning this award is going to get a few more of you to see my movie, and I am eternally grateful for that. So I think it was just classy of him to recognize that theoretically his movie was not better than every single movie produced in 2019.
Right.
And I think he could have gone up there and said, "Yeah, we're great. Thank you so much." I think he was smart enough to recognize, like, listen, everybody in this category but me has already been in the theater and has been tested by the American and international audiences. I'm not even in theaters yet. So thank you. Please see my movie. But it's like he recognized that, like, I do not want to take anything away from the other 200 something movies that came out last year when mine isn't even technically out yet.
Yeah.
So that's the thing too, is that, like you said, Two Towers 20 years from now or whatever it was released, like, when you go look at the history books, it'll say Golden Globe 2019, 1917. No one will remember that it hadn't even been released in theaters yet, and it is absolutely worthy. But it's a tough one considering all the movies that it overwrote, or, you know, quote unquote, took the award from.
Well, so
that whole process is bonkers, of
that
trying
brings
to, like,
up
get the right calendar year for stuff.
For sure.
It's weird.
But that brings up a question that I had. Now, I've not seen Parasite. Eric, you haven't seen it yet, right?
No, but
So-
I have wanted to see it.
Yeah.
I've seen his other movies.
Yeah,
so,
and nothing bad can be said. I think that he's a brilliant, not only filmmaker, but I think what's coming out of sort of the Southeast Asia and South Korea sort of area is emerging to be one of the most interesting markets for film. The only question I had was, I think maybe now that we are seeing that level of quality, I think that since they already shifted the verbiage from international, because it used to be best foreign film and best foreign,
Correct.
foreign.
right.
Excuse me. Now it's international. Goodness. So I don't know how I felt about a movie being nominated for best international picture as well as best picture. I think that now that we have seen the quality of picture of movies from other countries being a certain level, it's kind of like best short documentary is not going to be nominated for best documentary, you know, and vice versa.
Right.
You're not going to have that happen. I don't remember, though, and Nico, you could probably correct me if I'm wrong on this, but has an animated film been nominated for best animated feature as well as best picture? Or has it only been one or the other?
Well, no, I want to say something like either The Lion King or Beauty and the Beast was.
Beauty and the Beast
I'd have to go
won
look.
best picture, but I don't know if it was nominated for best animated as
Did
well.
it?
Or at least it was nominated for it.
Huh.
Yeah, I think that was like the last time, and I think, well, because they used to not have. I mean, the animated category used to not exist too.
Right.
So they created that category because of the surgence of animated films, and I remember when, like, I think Spirited Away won over like Toy Story and that kind of stuff, which is kind of like a wake up of like, hey, just because you had a multi-million-dollar Pixar film, that does not mean it was the best film. And I think there's another one a while back too, like The Three Sisters or something like that, that also won best animated feature, which was that's a whole nother thing about the Oscars we could talk about. I think I've talked about it before, about how I keep a running tally of awards won, and that best picture, they should kind of like how they have like a viewer's choice award in some places, but I always keep track of the amount of awards that a film wins throughout the entire night, so that when they come down to do like best picture, it should be like, oh well, this movie won 9 awards.
Yeah, because it is interesting when
this
somebody
happened
wins.
like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So like some movies will be nominated in various categories and not win at all, and then the only award they win is best picture, and you're like,
right. Yeah.
I mean, I know how the voting. I mean, I'll say I have a 70% good idea on how the voting goes. I used to know more intimately how that worked, but I don't anymore. So it is not just like a pure voting system. There's a lot of ins and outs and moving about that they do per category and like per specific category. Is it not the entire Academy doesn't vote on all of the nominees but they may vote on all the winners. It's a weird thing that they do.
Right. The specialized people get
Yes.
the nominees in, essentially, right? So it's like costume
But not in
design.
every
You're going to have
category,
costume
though. Yeah.
designers and people in that field that are voting for who the nominees become, right? Is that kind of how it works? And then
Yeah, right.
everyone from there can then vote on the final?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that, but it's not every category. It's not like
Okay.
just actors get to choose best actor. I mean, that's like that's a universal vote for nominees, and then they whittle it down. So it's kind of bonkers that way. But yeah, there's been. I'm curious to see when a film an animated film will win Best Picture, and I think it's really interesting too. And this is a good segue with The Irishman about the amount of garbage that Scorsese brought up about. Netflix films should, my film should never be viewed on a screen smaller than a theater, or some nonsense quote like that. And then people were posting a bunch of photos of people watching it on like their iWatch and stuff, which I thought was hilarious. But it's like, I get from his standpoint, I get it. I mean, you have these people that, they put in the hard work for the cinematography, for the lighting, for the costume design, set design. And when you're looking at a 480 by 220, like on an iPhone, you're gonna lose it. You're gonna lose that detail.
But to a certain
totally
extent,
get it.
that I was thinking about, strangely, is the color accuracy, the contrast, the resolution on a Retina screen on your iPhone is actually pixel for pixel a better way to watch a movie than on a
projection,
big TV from Walmart or whatever. It really actually is, because it is actually showing you a more accurate representation. It's just small. That's the only difference. But I wouldn't say that you get less immersed. It's weird, because I watched a little bit of a documentary while I was cooking the other night on my phone, and I just was looking at it going, it looks way better than on my TV, because this screen is just dollar for dollar a much better screen. If Apple ever made
I'm not
an
sure.
Apple TV, a 55, 65 inch Retina display. I mean, there are some that they've released recently as monitor displays, but like my LG display that I use, this widescreen monitor that I use, is vastly better than the TV that I have in terms of color representation and resolution and picture and all that stuff. I just wanted a little bit bigger to watch things on, but that's just the thing. So I get where he's coming from as far as size and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, go to a theater and try to watch an action movie. Sometimes the action is just so blurry, and the motion blur is just so crazy when that happens. Sometimes, I mean, this is it, and we need to embrace it, because people are going to watch movies on their phones and on their watches. So figure out how to enjoy it.
Thing.
Yeah.
Well, and two, that's more like an old man rant of him to be like, in my day we didn't watch things on our watches.
But wasn't it it was a Netflix release, wasn't it? The Irishman?
Yeah, it's Netflix. Yeah. That's the whole thing. That's like when he went on the rant about it. It's like,
but again, just to TV.
Do you not know who Netflix is?
Yeah,
maybe not.
Do you not understand?
But I think he's so old. He's just being
company.
cranky. But he came from a time when TV wasn't respected like it is now. That's when he was making movies way back when it was like, maybe there's a couple decent shows, but who cares about TV? TV's a joke.
Yeah.
But to your point, Matt, is when you're watching something, whether it's this big or gigantic, if it's good, you're going to be engrossed, period.
Oh, yeah. I'm completely engaged with
matter.
you guys right now, and you look and sound like crap. So,
Exactly.
But here we are, having a conversation.
That's just my face.
Yeah. Well, here you are forced with us.
Yeah. But I think that is interesting because you can't force everybody to watch something on a great TV or on a great whatever. So you have to compete with it somehow. And so, I mean, I would rather a person honestly sometimes watch a movie on their phone or on their MacBook Pro or whatever over, a cheap TV or something like that, because of the fact that you do get just a better look and feel. My problem is that nobody watches movies with the right sound. Very, very rarely is anyone watching a movie with a proper amount of proper sound, like speakers or anything like that. I tend to watch a lot of movies with headphones in, with my Beats headphones,
I
because
think that's
I get a
become
really
a new
great
normal
experience
too, though.
Yeah.
Right. And those are going to be hit or miss, but I think by and large there's probably younger people watching things on their phone with buds in some kind of or a good earphone noise canceling maybe. Because young people still like Beats or whatever, they're noise canceling headphones. So I think that's still happening.
That's what I'm wearing.
See, there you go.
And they're great. And
Look at you, young person. You're so hip.
I wear them because they make me feel young. But I have AirPods as well that I use with my phone, and the sound in the AirPods is so good. It's just so good. And I haven't tried the brand new ones, but yeah, there's nothing. You're missing nothing with those. You're missing nothing with Beats. I just actually got 2 computer monitor speakers just for the house while I'm here and not at the studio, because I have like a 5.1 system that I edit on, which I think maybe some editors would kill me for that, because then if I'm not using that, I'm using my Beats. So I think that maybe they might be mad at me for that. But the thing is that I get a nice representation of what it's going to sound like once I export it and listen to the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, this is how people are going to hear it. May as well just cut right to it and hear it the way you're going to hear it. Yeah. But that's the thing. Like, I worked my bottom off on that HDTV video that I made about, it was about Fort Morgan, a little bit about the history, and I did some stuff in the museum, and I worked so hard on the sound design because I wanted to create a really cool experience of, as the pictures were coming in, you would feel the sounds of the rain or the horses and this kind of thing when you're looking at those old photos. But I know that nobody heard that, and that's the thing, because people are probably just watching it on their phone or on their computer with the computer speakers. So no one really heard.
Or worst case, they're at work and there's no sound and they're just like, I'm just going to watch this and I forget to go home and rewatch it. Yeah, you don't know what
throw on the auto-generated captions or something like that. But the effort that goes into this stuff is it's a lot of effort. And so I like the idea of being able to hear it the way that it should be heard.
Yeah. Well, and two, I think to that other point is, if you limit the way people can watch things, then they might just not watch your thing. Yeah. If you don't make it accessible, then you're a ghost. And so to that point of Scorsese complaining, you're like, well, okay, you can be a dinosaur in that way and you'll disappear.
Way more people watch his movies because of that, because it's all on Netflix. That's just the truth.
Yeah. Because it's convenient. You're not going to stop that progress.
Yeah. He almost lost me after that Andrew Garfield, Adam Driver movie about the priests that go to Japan to find a lost priest during.
Oh, it's Liam Neeson.
Oh. Yeah,
in that.
Don't see it. Oh my God, it had such a high level of pedigree, but I think it's like 3 hours and 15 minutes.
That's not like Scorsese. JK.
Like, tear my eyes out. Yeah. It was. I took Andrea.
It's like pedigree dog food after it went through the dog.
Yeah,
that was the pedigree.
That's what we were going for.
It was. Oh man, it's like it's such long nonsense, and it does have a really good ending, but like the journey to get there.
Yeah,
is so
what's the point of a good ending if you can't get there soon enough?
Yeah, it's so up its own butt to get there. Oh man, it was a tough one.
He
almost lost me like full credit when I saw that, and I was like, okay, he's clearly lost the touch of, or he tried to do something that's out of his scope, and don't do that. And then when he made The Irishman, I was like, but that felt more like his jam, like right up his line, like Departed. It was super good.
But it seems like another. Oh, look, he's doing a gangster movie.
Yeah.
Ooh,
no, hop on. I mean, and watch that
is
one before
what it
next
is.
week if you have a chance. Cause it's well worth it. It was 3.5 wonderful hours. I enjoyed
I'm fascinated by that
immensely.
Story.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great story.
I heard about this story before.
Yeah. But Pesci drives the movie, and Pesci doesn't drive a lot of movies. And the fact that he's the
last
guy,
thing he drove before that was a Snickers commercial.
Yeah. And Home Alone,
like literally, he hasn't done anything for a while.
Yeah, and he's
just avoiding Hollywood.
The cast is amazing.
It's good
in it. I do love it though when great directors, when iconic directors put out a real stinker. I love it. It's a good feeling because it's like a palate cleanser. They just gotta like get it out of their system. It's like, I really want to do a movie about a priest and his priest friend going to Japan. And you know,
Save
everyone
another
was just
priest.
like, let's let him do it because it's gonna suck. And
He's
maybe
gonna
Then he'll go back to
self-funded if he don't
gangsters
do it
after
anyway.
that.
exactly. He'll go back to giving us a gangster movie. Fingers crossed.
He'll go back to to his usual Pesci and
Yeah.
and
Because that's all we really want. That's literally all we want.
So to tie in directors and Oscars too, I was having a discussion with somebody about the nominees for Best Director, and my stake in the argument was, well, the argument started with that it was an all male representation one more time, and I mentioned it. It is one of those categories which does get nominated by directors first, so you do have to have a DGA or whatever, and be marked as a director in the Academy in order to choose the pool that is then the nominees, which is then voted on by the populace. But I was, and having worked with you, Matt, I do not know how you would nominate that position. That's such a interesting behind the scenes misnomer of a position, in that truly seeing what a director does on a film is not necessarily public access.
Right.
So
Very
it's
insular.
not like you can, like when you watch the movie and you see the costume design, you can be like, oh, that person has a great eye for color pattern, production, whatever. But director is such a literally behind the cameras, behind the scenes type thing that it's impossible to, at least for the layman, for the person outside, to, you hear the names like Scorsese and Tarantino and on and on and on, and then you see like, oh well, you know, Catherine Bigelow was not nominated again, or Greta Gerwig was, you know, her film is nominated for Best Picture, Little Women, but she was not nominated for Best Director, and it's such a slight. And part of me is like, well, how many directors were working and produced films last year? There's probably, let's say 200. So to limit that down to 5 is already a monumental task. But I don't know how you could literally say, like looking at Tarantino versus Scorsese and say, on this film, in this particular situation, you did a better job than he did or she did.
Yeah.
I literally don't know how you do that, having seen what the director does now behind it all. And again, that's not public knowledge.
Right.
So it's, and we, the discussion went into, well, some directors just direct. They're paid to direct, call it a day, that's it. Some directors are producers, have a screenwriter credit. They've got all these additional credits that go on. So are they
more of a passion
or less
as
worthy?
opposed to a gig? Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Right.
and I think
So
that they
that's hard to say.
try to take that sort of the cumulative, the sum of the parts, looking at the cast and the movie itself and the script and everything, and I think that maybe is how you judge that. But I totally agree. It's an insular thing. It would be like saying best doctor. Like, well, you really only have your own experience with that doctor or whatever. And
Right.
so it always goes back to your point about, well, how can you win best director and then then the movie wins nothing else? Because that's happened before too.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
Or how does it win best director and not best picture? Because it seems like if you were the best director, your movie should probably win best picture as well, because that just seems to go hand in hand. But yeah, I honestly don't know how it's figured out or how it's decided. I think that it can be to a certain extent arbitrary. If you think about the system as a whole, though, you have to work so hard to even be considered to direct a movie that could potentially be nominated for an Oscar. So that in and of itself is an amazing feat. You're already directing a movie that has that potential. Okay, that just starts with it. How many female directors are there? As just a matter of ratio, it's not even close, right? I mean, it's a male dominated sport. And then you just take the arbitrary nature of how is all of this nominated, or how is all of this decided? And I honestly don't really know how it works in
because there's
of the decision making.
I don't think there's like a checklist. I don't think there's like a it's not like getting a status report for being the CEO of a company. You know, it's not like, oh, well, this movie grossed X dollars, it cost Y dollars to make, so it had a net profit of Z. Let's talk about there's no statistics like that are used in the determination of this award. You know, which is basically like best director is basically like a best boss type.
Right.
award.
I was just going to
World's
put
best
it to
boss.
like a guy working for the city, and he's got a crew that's filling manholes. And it's like, well, what manhole ended up being filled the best? Who used the talents of those workers filling that
Right.
manhole the best? And while that seems very silly, the comparison is you have all these different artists working for a motion picture, hundreds ultimately of people. And so if the director's the linchpin that's going, how do I shepherd all of these voices, all of these artists towards telling the story? I mean, that's ultimately their job, right? They're keeping the train moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone does their due diligence and they're like, well, I'm voting on best director, so I'm going to call everybody who worked with Quentin, everybody who worked with Sam, everybody who worked with,
Right.
So you just go through and just find all these people and say, what was your experience working with him on set? I don't think that, obviously, that doesn't happen. It is just, I think, associated with the sum of its parts, and you just watch a movie and go, because
Absolutely.
so I didn't see all of them. I saw the majority of the Best Picture nominees. I can tell you that as of right now, I would have voted for Quentin, because I can watch a movie and see what it looks like to have an actor who's engaged. I can see what it looks like to have those many parts just sort of fall right into line. I mean, you just look at it and go, okay, that's how I would make the decision, but I really don't know how anyone else makes the decision.
Well, yeah, and I think part of it too is, for me, it's always been the director of like how much of a fingerprint on a movie can you attribute to the director. Like when you watch a Tarantino film, it's not a surprise.
Yeah,
it's not like I don't know who directed this. No, you know 100%.
And just by the music, yeah.
Well, that's both a good and a bad thing too, because like if you watch a J.J. Abrams and there's a million screen wipes and like camera flares, you're like, well, that's an Abrams. Like the directors have a signature, and that's fine. And aside from using the same actors over and over and over, which I think is just a compatibility thing, it's still super tough, because then you could say like, oh well, so then it's, I hate to say this, then it's like a popularity contest of
Oh, that's
like,
involved as well.
That's all it
like,
is, really.
You don't have to pretend that's not happening.
I didn't want to make it sound like it's, because that makes it even worse when people are like, oh, you weren't nominated because of X, Y, or Z. You know, like that just makes it kind of, pardon my, it makes it shitty. So I again, I don't know. And I think the best thing that comes from it, which is terrible, is that there's just more of an optics on, there are people doing good work that aren't part of like the top 10 that we need to start considering. You know, we need to start taking a stronger look. And if that involves a more stringent or a different way in which nominations are produced, then that's what needs to happen. But from the total casual viewer, when you sit down and you watch an award show and they have best director, it's 99% of the time it's attached to a very successful movie, which makes sense. But you also don't get, but like the Parasite one was such a curveball this year, because I remember seeing it. I saw an ad for Parasite in the middle of the summer attached to some little indie film that I had hunted down. And because it had just won a Cannes Film Festival, I think. And they, it was just on, I think it was, I don't want to say the wrong name, but some production company who's known very well of doing smaller budget films, but bringing also international stuff across too. I had seen one of their films, and this was in front of that as a trailer, and I'm like, holy cow. And they listed off the Toronto Film Festival, Cannes Film Festival. They listed off all these Grand Plume awards, and I'm like, wow, I need to remember to hunt this down. And then I couldn't find it to save my life until like a month before the award season started. And I did miss it during award season because I couldn't get it to work out. But then, best director, what else he won? Best director, best film, and something else.
And best international,
and
as well.
Best international film. But like, and I don't know.
There would be 0% chance that anyone in the Academy would even know if he's a capable director on set, right? I mean, unless they flew to Korea and made the movie with him. Yeah, exactly. And it is, but I think that this is a great thing for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is because it's ushering in a new era. It's recognizing that the world is this big wide world that's super small now, and so your ability to make a film in any part of the world and then become internationally recognized as one of the best movies on earth is amazing. And that opens the door for everybody.
Absolutely.
We saw this in the early 2000s with guys like Mark Forster and other Scandinavian directors who were using little Sony Handycams and making movies and getting attention, or even, what's his name? Sex, Lies, and Videotapes guy. That style of movie where, or even Clerks, you were seeing it in the 90s and early 2000s where guys were making little movies on no budget with terrible gear and getting international acclaim. But it's on a different level now where we have Netflix and you can watch any movie at any time from anywhere,
right,
for free or for $2.99 on Amazon or whatever it is. So it's going to change the way that we look at Oscars and the way that we look at movies in general, and that is a good thing. People are gonna
if it sticks, because it's like my example. So I have like old man drinking friends.
Old man drinking
one
friends?
of them. Old man drinking friends
like
on Friday
old
nights.
men?
I go to a place and like older guys, yeah, right. So like
Tell me
my
more
old man
about
drinking
this.
friends, so I call them. But anyways, there's this guy he's like a total like just film nut, but he watches, like, he goes to the Harvard film archives and the different kind of independent theaters, and just watches anything and everything, and his knowledge of movies throughout time, but also now. And anytime he would talk about things and talk about the Oscars, he's like, "Oh, the Oscars have been a joke for many decades, since like the 30s, but if you get his top 10, maybe some year there'll be one American movie, maybe,
right?
And so for him, I go, this guy sees a lot of stuff, and he's a very bright guy. So I go, okay, here we go. And I think Parasite was that first time where the Oscars went, okay, let's actually a movie around the whole globe that is actually good, that someone who watches movies on that level could say, okay, Parasite, sure, I'll give him that. That's like the first time in forever. So if that's a true thing, that the Oscars are going to start inviting in more movies, international movies, then yeah, it could be a good thing. And Netflix having Roma, things like that, it is starting to seep in.
I think
that could be very good.
Interesting about the documentary part of it too was, so I saw For Sama, which is it was a documentary about a family in Syria who was having a baby during this entire crisis, and it basically just, this lady just rolled tape on every event, on everything that happened. And I also saw American Factory, which was really interesting, especially from the perspective of the fact that I work in a factory and I like documentaries. So it was really interesting to watch. For Sama was like on a different level in terms of viewing experience, and should have 1,000,000% won the Oscar, because a person was basically risking their entire life for the last decade to make a movie. Yeah. And then once the movie was made and it was out there, getting death threats and being threatened to be murdered for exposing what was going on there. And American Factory was a brilliantly made movie in a lot of ways, but it was about a bunch of whiny Americans and who were just complaining about the fact that they weren't making $36 an hour anymore. Now they're making $16 an hour in an industry that was dying anyways. So I just think it was an interesting. I don't know why it won. Honestly, I don't. Yeah, it was a good movie, but it was, and I if I had made it, I would have been crazy proud. But especially just the way that the movie ended, and just kind of how it was kind of open ended. It was just like, I don't know. It was good. It was a nice
competitive nature.
Yeah, it was a nice watch. But For Sama was just like, you want to barf your guts out with Jeffy moments at every second, because it was just that heart wrenching. You know,
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, that's tough too, because it's a lot of that is objective as well. You know, sometimes, what I was gonna, in preparation for this, I was going through the list of the Best Picture ones and why another film should have beaten Parasite, and then why it definitely should not have. One of those films in particular was Ford versus Ferrari, which my argument for beating it was because I am not a car person, but that movie made me care about cars so much.
More than the Pixel Cars movies?
Pixar.
Yes, more than Pixar cars.
More than
What
cars.
about planes?
It took a very detailed topic, and it inspired me to want to like learn the language, learn more about it, and it made me care about cars for 2 hours.
I almost shut it off, by the way. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I remember you texting.
Yeah, I texted
when
you
I
guys.
went and watched
Yeah,
Tim
I was
and
like
Eric.
20 minutes
that
in,
was
or
that
like,
night, and you were like, I'm watching this garbage movie.
It felt like because the first 15 minutes, the music and the style of the movement of the camera and the acting.
There's bad sound in
I
that
was
movie.
like, this is a Penny Marshall movie from the 90s. Like, I am not watching this movie. And Nick texted me, was like, just hang on, just wait. And I was like, I'm going to give it a chance. Okay. And I went back to it. Brilliantly acted and obviously well made. But it just, like, the doop, boop, 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 doot, 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 sort of nature of the music, and then the horrible. I'm just like, why do you have to have a song from the 50s as your intro song when it takes place in the 50s? Why does it have to be CCR? Why does it have to be all these things? Do something different. And so I was immediately sucked out of the movie, and I didn't want to watch it. But I'm glad I powered through because it ended up being a pretty good film. But I totally interrupted you, Nico. My bad.
No, you're fine. So yeah, the reason I think it was because it made me care about car, like a subject.
A thing that you did not give a crap about. Yeah. All of a sudden, you're a petrol head.
It pulled me in. But the reason I would say it would not win is because for me, I have a hard time giving Best Picture to quote unquote real stories, to true stories. Because like you said, it's kind of like Titanic, like the boat sinks, man. Like there's no surprise what happens. Or Seabiscuit, like the horse wins the race. Like anything that's based off a historical or factual time can be a great film. But for me, part of a great film is also the creation of something from nothing. So you're not leaning on existing work and then improving it. You're coming up with something from nothingness. Now you could borrow tropes and all that kind of fun stuff too. How did I get here?
Why you hated 1917?
So documentaries
based off
I feel
of a real war,
are where it's hard to judge best documentary because you will get into a situation, yes, where it's already based off of life. It's nonfiction.
Yeah.
So then your judgment on documentary is how invested in this nonfiction do I get? Whereas in like Ford versus Ferrari, know nothing about cars, made me think about cars, great. But in like the two cases you did, the American Factory versus the other one, that judging has to be based off of how much of a connection you get with real life, knowing that it's definitely not fake. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's kind of like previous winners like Blackfish, or The Cove. Oh my God! Like those movies.
What's that subject matter, and how much weight does it carry? Oh, I did an amazing documentary about a puppy. Yeah, the puppy rolled around. It was cute. We all loved it. It pooped. It puked. But over here is the Syrian war.
Yeah, here I have this atrocity of mankind, and I put myself in danger. I was trying to. There's another documentary. What's it called? I'm probably gonna screw it up. I think it's Aleppo, but that might be wrong. But it's about the soldiers on like
Hornet's Nest?
on like I think the Pakistan. They're on like a border of like Turkey and Pakistan or something like that, and it's this outpost that has basically been told you can't leave, but we're also not gonna send you any support. Yeah. So they're basically this last line of communication up to the front, and a documentary journalist goes up there, meets the soldiers, they talk about conditions, et cetera, but then it comes under fire, and he basically walks you through this live fire scenario, and people are getting hit and all this stuff, and it's like, my God. But then you watch the documentary on the guy who's climbing a rock with no ropes, and you're like, cool.
Yeah. Well, and I think that part of it is
but like side by
voters.
side, how do you
judge
compare
that?
them?
Yeah,
Like, side by side, how do you judge that?
Yeah, how do
That's what I'm
you
getting
how
at.
do you
That's what I'm
remove the subject matter and see the brilliance of the editing, the brilliance of
construction.
telling that story? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's where I was with. That's where I was at with Forsama. It was hundreds of thousands of hours of footage that had to get basically smuggled out, from Syria to a British, and found its way into the hands of a British filmmaker who ended up, helping edit it. It is an amazing story in and of itself. And American Factory, though, so this is the thought that I had while you were talking about this was American Factory is something that contextually probably most of the people voting in the Academy have no idea what it's like to work in middle America, have no idea what it's like to literally be paycheck to paycheck, or to live in Ohio or Detroit or even northeastern Colorado. They have no context. So it's fascinating to them. They've probably been bleeding hearts their entire lives. So they're like, Syrian war, it's heart-wrenching, but look at these people. I don't know, maybe this is all complete conjecture.
Right, the time where we're in the very divided America and people are going, maybe I need to force myself to listen to the other side.
And I think it's
of.
great. It's definitely, just from a film perspective, I was like, Forsama was a better movie, but it's not the kind of movie I would make because I don't want to do found footage. Like, that's just not my style. American Factory is the kind of movie that I would make, but I think it wasn't as good a film as Forsama, at least for my money.
And that's fair, but again, that's impossible to judge. It's so hard to judge because the Best Picture one is all fiction, even though it's based on true events. And my favorite part is when you watch the credits and at the very end it says like all things are fictitious and not based on. I mean, that's
any
because,
character, yada yada.
Right. It's basically what they're saying is that we used zero actual footage. Yes, like you made a movie about JFK, but we used zero of the Dallas footage. So that's what that statement is basically saying, is that this was all manufactured footage, not documentary footage, if you will call it that.
So on your list, on your list over there, do you have every nominee for Best Picture and why it could have won? Or did you just do it with a couple of them? Because I think that's interesting.
No, I did it with the whole list. Yeah.
Yeah, what is the list, first off, for Best Picture?
Sure, yeah. So I'll rattle through the list. So Parasite won.
Yep, I do want. I definitely. I'll watch that next. I'll say that.
And then there was Ford versus Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit.
Oh yeah, Jojo Rabbit. Yeah, I do want to. I like Taika.
Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Okay. Hey, down. I'm so close.
That's a pretty. It's a pretty diverse.
Yeah, it's true. The subject matter is all over the place.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It's very
different. And
right.
a kind of an interesting smattering of directors. Anyone from Noah Baumbach to Scorsese. To people we've never heard of. It's
right.
Cool. Who directed Jojo Rabbit? Was it?
That was Taika.
Oh, our New Zealand darling.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, the win not win of each one. I'll start with Parasite because it did win. The reason I marked down that it would win is because the construction of that story and the layering of events is bonkers. It's so good. And then there are some amazing cinematographic shots in there that he mentioned in his speech, how he is inspired by other directors, and you could see the influence in it, but it wasn't in like an insulting or like a cheap copy and paste kind of way. Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I would say it would. The reason I say it wouldn't win is because not to be a jerk about it, but because of the international film aspect of it, where the Oscars have always been an American award. This sounds terrible. It's always been an American award, and the reason I say it is because we have a foreign film category.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not a worldly award, and then you completely have a foreign film category. So that's just a blanket statement. I'm not trying to be racist about it. It's just a thing. So that's why I would be like, best international film, 100% absolutely. But Best Picture, that's a tough one. But the Oscars have always been a quote unquote like an American award, which I know sounds like a nice white American way of saying that, but yeah.
But I agree. But that was my
so
whole
that's
point
its
ahead.
hiccup.
It wasn't to suggest that it was undeserving by any stretch, even though I haven't
Right.
seen it, and it wasn't to suggest that.
But in the nature of
the
the
nature of the category,
categories.
yeah, that's all it was. Was just that are we going to
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
movies being able to be nominated across the different categories? Because
Yeah.
like a rectangle isn't a square, but a square is a rectangle. That kind of thing. We can't nominate
Absolutely.
everything for
Well,
everything.
it's the same reason I was mad that 1917 won Best Picture at the Golden Globes, because it's like you haven't even been out yet.
Right.
Like you're 100% a marketing ploy because you've now
Yes, this
gone
is
from
advertising.
yeah, you've now gone from domestically making 50 million to making 120 million.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations, good job. It cost you nothing to do that. Very, very minimal marketing money, but now you've doubled it. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Not that the movie is not worthy, just that's what you did. You know it. Admit
Right.
it. You're jerks.
And you're 2.5 years too late.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right.
All right, so Ford versus Ferrari, kind of went into that one.
Mm-hmm.
Like win because of what it caused you to do, plus the performances, and the handling of that story is phenomenal.
And Christian Bale just not with an accent, right? He was good to hear Israel.
Yeah, he actually talked like his normal self.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
His mouth still moves all weird.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally weird.
My
It's just
downside,
natural.
my downside on Ford versus Ferrari was, I have an issue with True Stories being the best film because it feels like a cheap on the story writing. But also, I had so many times, and I saw it in the theater, I had so many times where the sound mixing was so bad that all the car sounds overwrote the dialogue completely. So like people are having conversations, things are being said, there's a voice or whatever.
I hate when
But
the
it-
sound
It was all just them like
balance is off.
shifting gears.
That's a
and-
broadcast problem.
They did a good
though.
thing and not like having them like shift into 20th gear.
Yeah.
Which some movies like Fast and the Furious, they just keep shifting. Like what?
Yeah.
It's like endless
But-
bullets in the magazine.
Yeah.
yeah, that kind
But
of
that
thing.
was a broadcast
so-
problem on where you were watching it for sure. Because I watched it on iTunes with my Beats
Sure.
headphones, and I was like pooping my
That's fair. Yeah.
pants because it was so good.
that happens too. I mean that happens a lot.
Because the
where you go to
balance,
one
that
theater
was-
and it's too dark.
Yeah, and that was the thing
in
that I
one theater,
noticed.
it's-
The balance between
Yeah.
the sound, like the dialogue, and the sound design, the special effects was spot on. So that is really unfortunate because you missed out on a really cool experience.
and that happens
Yeah.
So I should watch it on the toilet.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying?
Yes.
Watch it in the toilet.
in a room, full
Yeah.
volume, just bouncing around,
Yeah.
just sound everywhere.
Just get in the tub
on your
and be
iPhone.
ready to poop.
Let's see. So then we have
I have a droid. Boy.
so then we have The Irishman.
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason, so this one falls into that true story. It's about Jimmy Hoffa though.
Well,
so it's like
it's
how
a
much of a true
conjecture.
story-
Maybe it's
Yeah,
a true
yeah.
story.
It's an
right?
adapted screenplay
Yeah,
to a book,
This could
though.
have happened.
Also,
The
that.
book was I Hear You Paint Houses, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, what they
so-
say to hitmen, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I hear you paint houses. You're a hitman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the negative was the true story stuff. I also felt like they bounced around in time incorrectly. Like it felt like they were using
Oh, right, because they de-age
flashback
and
type
they go
stuff.
back and forth.
Yeah, they
right?
de-aged and then aged them, but they almost did it in like a look what we can do with technology type of way
Too showy.
versus in helping a story type of way.
But they did that well. I mean, I don't want to be Mr. Captain Poo Poo Pants all the time about this stuff, but because I'm such a huge fan of the movie and
That's fair.
Scorsese in
I
general.
think we're being Captain Poo Poo Pants about it, so you can be.
well, I started
Join
with the
us.
bad. I
You
didn't,
could
I
be
didn't lead into the
everybody's
good.
Pants.
Admiral Poo Poo Pants. I'm already Captain Poo Poo Pants. I claim Captain.
I'll
You can
be Rear Admiral.
Rear Admiral Poo Poo Pants.
So the thing is that he does that in all of his films. Look at Casino.
Yeah.
Look at Goodfellas. He's bouncing back and forth, but there was no aging because it was just Ray Liotta or whatever. And maybe the haircut would be different, the clothes would be different, the set design would be different to suggest a different time period, but there would be bouncing back and forth. I thought it was really cool, and it made sense, and my eye caught it every time, so I was super into it. I liked it when they bounced back and forth. My only issue was that young De Niro still walked like old De Niro and things like that. Whereas like you're old, so when you're playing 30-year-old you, they should have figured out a way to like kind of cut the gut a little bit, or get an actor who used to walk like him, or something to just give you just a little nugget of belief that was there. But I thought the use of time was really cool. I really liked how they bounced back and forth, and how especially Hoffa could be younger than older and stuff. So it worked for me, but it might not work for everyone. Old Admiral
How far
Poopy
back
Pants
did they
loved
go? Do you see?
Well, that's you see. Yeah, you see De
Or
Niro
is
when
he a
he's
toddler?
like, I guess,
Do you see him as a
20.
toddler?
No, he's like
80-year-old
right out of high
toddler.
school type age, kind of thing.
Yeah.
A Benjamin Button scenario.
Yeah, all the way up to nursing home. So I think it was just they cut around on it too much. I'm not saying it wasn't good or they did it at the right times. I think it was all over the place just to kind of like show off that they could do it a little bit.
Right, because it's more of a technology
excessively.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. And someone I work with that likes those type of movies, he was kind of like, he wasn't a fan of the de-aging. So I think that's the thing. If you're not a fan of it, then that becomes an issue.
Yeah.
If you don't worry about it, then you're fine. Then you're Rear
Yeah.
Admiral Poo Poo Pants over there. That like it.
So then the next contender, Jojo Rabbit.
Didn't see it. Not
So I'll
yet.
start with the good stuff. I think
And
the
a real
idea,
balance, right? From not knowing
Yeah.
anything, it seems like he was walking a real tightrope of making something horribly offensive if it goes wrong.
Yes.
Right?
Well, it is a screenplay, or it's a book that he was given and he adapted it.
Okay.
But right, he does a great job of. He also has just a really good eye for comedy, but he also has an amazing. Either it's him or people around him have an amazing eye for continuity. There's always something in his movies that he will flash to you early, he will reflash to you at a later date, and then it will be some heartbreaking moment later in the movie. And in this one in particular, without spoiling what goes on, that vehicle in Jojo Rabbit is shoes. Because like Jojo is a little kid, so his mom is constantly tying his shoes. That also plays into like the Holocaust nature of shoes, you know how that goes. But in this particular one, it's shoes are the vehicle where it's like, oh, it's a little thing that's kind of funny. And then it happens later on, you're like, and then it happens, and you get like,
it's profound. Yeah.
like, oh my god, it's right. That's the line he runs of, take away the comedy part, and that's like watching Schindler's List.
Right.
You add the comedy in to break the tension, but he does it comically, but he doesn't do it in such a way that it's goofy. It is the right amount of tension break using comedy. And then having him play this kid's imaginary friend Hitler is a bonkers idea in general, but he does it so right in that it's not an offensive Hitler. That's not the right way to say that, but it's not such a caricature that it becomes like a silly, gross thing. It's just, this is this kid's imaginary friend who, in the Hitler youth, you were taught that Hitler was the idol. He is what you want to become. So it just happens to be that's this kid's imaginary friend, played by Taika, who does just a great job of just kind of writing the line with it and delivering the lines without being like Will Ferrell and the producers kind of thing.
Yeah, I think what I was like having a text conversation with other friends about, I think the episode of The Mandalorian that he did or something. But like I love that Thor movie he did, Ragnarok.
Yep.
But what I feel he's able to do is, as silly and kind of ridiculous as moments he finds, he's always true to characters, and I think he's very good at finding where you can have a character that in one moment is doing something that's very silly, or it's put in a context it's very silly, but that same character 5 minutes later can be in another thing, and there's heavy heart, there's emotion, there's stakes involved, and you don't feel like they're two different characters. You go, yeah, that's the same person. And not only that, but you go, like with Thor, I went, oh man, I love Thor way more now, because I see in his silliness there's vulnerability to him, and so I think he's able to find these ways of, through humor, to make you endear yourself to the character more.
And Scarlett Johansson
when
crushes
he makes something that's heartbreaking, it still pays off.
Yeah, Scarlett Johansson crushes her role in this movie too, and I think she was nominated for a Globe. I don't know if she was nominated for an Oscar, but yeah, she crushed it like in such a great way, which is super good.
Nice.
So that's why it should have won. The reasons it should not have won, there aren't many, because it was my pick for Best Picture, but nice. I think you could make an argument that making light of the situation is just not up everyone's scheme.
It's just too big of a hill to climb.
Sensitive. Right? Yeah, it's people are going to go in with a preconceived notion, and making light of that isn't going to strike true for people.
Well, and it also there's maybe people can consider a redundancy in that Life is Beautiful kind of did that years ago with what's his name, the Italian guy.
Oh yeah, Benigni.
What the heck's his name?
Roberto Benigni.
Yeah. Roberto Benigni, yeah, right. So he did that, and he made that mold. So I think too, it's like there are movies like Green Book. Was that last year or something? There's movies that come out that feel very Oscar baity, but you're like, oh, well, that was perfect Oscar bait 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Now we're in this version of Oscar bait for this year, and that's kind of a game that the Oscars do as well.
Yeah, for sure. All right. The next one is Joker, which we talked a little bit about. We'll start with the positives. My positive on it was from a, and this is where this is my positive, but also the negative is that it's such a distinctly strong character decision to center an entire movie around mental health. In that, I think I said this the other time too. I think if you don't call it Joker, if you call it something else, it becomes like a falling down. Yeah, I like turtles. It becomes a completely different movie, and it carries a different context. When you attach it to the DC universe, people are looking for the Batman connections. They're looking like they want it to be more Joker-esque. So I think that's where it failed in that it was. Yes. I also don't think it would have gotten made, to be completely honest, if it didn't have kind of like how the movie Battleship was not a great movie. It's never going to get made though, but it got that Hasbro money and or the Mattel money or whoever. It got that additional funding, so it got made. So I think it
got that Transformers money essentially.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, right. So I think if Joker hadn't have been called Joker, somebody would have looked at it and be like, now is not the time to produce a movie about a mentally ill person killing the rich.
Sure,
it's just not the time for that.
I don't think there's any.
So that's
time
why
for
I think
it.
that's why. Well,
but you're right in that. But it's like the fact that Joaquin Phoenix had been trying to crawl his way back from kind of making fun of celebrity from documentary or fake documentary he did. Right, he was like he was. In Time Out, kind of. And so he's at that moment where everyone's like, all right, we're ready to not hate you now. And he hits this moment, and, superhero movies are huge. It was like this perfect storm of the timing just happened to work right. And I think it did get elevated way above what it was.
For sure.
It somehow became Oscar bait, which was surprising.
Agreed.
Well, I think from an individual character performance, I know, Matt, you don't agree with me here, but what he did to produce the character of Joker, and like you can tell, like they did a story about what's his name, the guy who did the Joker in Suicide Squad,
Jared Leto.
Jared Leto.
Yeah, thank you.
I finally watched that
Jared
movie,
Leto was nominated for Dallas Buyers Club, in which he transformed himself in that movie and did the most amazingly stunning performance, like character, like a classical actor. Like, it was bonkers. It was so good. But then when he went to do Suicide Squad, there's stories of him like sending dead rats to his castmates, and it's like, I'm not sure what part of you're not the star of this movie. Like you are not the Heath Ledger Joker that was quintessential for The Dark Knight to be a good movie. You just happen to be in this movie about the Suicide Squad. So stop trying to be Heath Ledger, because it's not. That's not
Heath
the
Ledger
role for you. That's not this Joker
to create a mentally ill
right.
character.
But I think
Jack Nicholson played the movie star version. Heath Ledger played the real version of it, and now everybody wants to recreate their version of the Joker.
Yeah.
kind of
you do.
in
But
his.
And
so I would
his,
give
from a
him-
visual point, was awful to get go. The second you see this tattoo on his head and all this crap,
Yeah.
you're like, ah.
Yeah, he was the comic
This
book
looks
version for
bad
sure.
from
Yeah,
the
it was
start.
The Jared Leto, you mean?
Yeah, Jared
Yeah.
Leto.
the Jared Leto.
He
one,
was
yeah.
brilliant
So
though
that's-
in
so that's why-
Blade Runner, aforementioned Blade Runner.
Yeah,
great
Right,
in that
but he's
movie.
still also like this kind of over-the-top weirdo. He happens to be the character fit correctly,
Yeah,
but he's still like this blind guy who's like, and you could very easily go, oh, look at this a-hole doing his thing again. Oh, Jared Leto. I hate this guy. You know, I could see people doing
Just
that.
feeling around.
So that's what I had for the plus minus
Yeah.
on those.
My
so
minus on Joker
I will-
was it was
I
a
will
big
s-
stinky poop. That's
I thought it was redundant. I may have brought this up. I felt like it was, it's Taxi Driver. It's a superhero movie that's cashing in on
Yeah.
what worked for these other movies.
Yeah.
It's this plus that, which, like, how do you get nominated for an Oscar in doing that? I thought it had some nice shots. But the message itself, too, was like, what are we supposed to take away from this? Do we murder
Right.
the rich? How
what's the lesson
irresponsible
here?
are we supposed to be
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
movie? And is it? So I applaud it that it didn't tell me what I should think. Maybe.
Right. Which I guess that's kind of like, that's why if it hadn't been titled Joker, I it wouldn't have got made, because when it's titled Joker, you're like, oh, this is where the villain comes from.
Yeah,
This is
origin
the origin story. But if it wasn't the Joker, you're exactly right. You're sitting there like, what am I supposed to learn? What
Right.
now? Like, where's this? But when it's Joker, you're like, I know where this is going.
But even when it's the Joker, I go, this guy does not have the strength to be the Joker. I don't see that character being the Joker that I understand the Joker to be.
and I am just very. I know this sounds strange, but I just don't.
I liked his performance. I want to say that.
Yeah.
I was not on the I was not on that side of going, oh, screw this guy. But even then, I went, this doesn't feel like a capable Joker, like Heath Ledger's Joker felt like, or like Jack Nicholson's Joker, that could command people, that could get people to follow him and know what he's doing and be smart enough to go, I can
The chaotic planning. Yeah.
I'm chaotic, but I know exactly what I'm doing, and I will outsmart Batman every day of the week.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't understand
so
why
there's-
we are just so okay with the violence, though, and just generally, like society-wise and all this stuff. And I know we had this conversation, I think, 2 podcasts ago, a little bit, but we just got to be really careful, man, because I think that the pervasive violence that is a through line in all of our films right now, and has been probably for like the last 20 years, is potentially destructive, and I see it on a slightly like more interesting level with having 5-year-old nephews who are into Star Wars and things like that, and you see the true influence that even just a Star Wars prequel has on them, where you don't think of it being violent, but then when you look at it side by side to maybe one of the original Star Wars movies, you're like, ugh, like this is a bit much. And I think
If you watch a thing with a 5-year-old, your perception's
you
gonna be
realize what
completely
you're
different.
seeing.
Yeah.
That's why I do not like the Guardians movies. Like, I think that they're awful. And one of the reasons I think they're awful, especially number 2, is it's just incessant killing. Like, it just never stops. And then when the killing stops, they're picking on Baby Groot. And it's just disgusting. And I think that they're awful representations of what superhero movies could be, because it's just constant death and violence. And
life is cheap in those movies.
and do we think that this is not
except
going to
for
hurt?
a handful of people.
Yeah, is this not hurting people? Even though it's a giant fake spaceship full of evil pirates, it's still killing. It's still death, and it's still death in a really and it's a far too. I'm trying to think what I'm trying to say here. It's putting it on a pedestal. The great music, the cool sound
it's
effects, the
glorifying
amazing.
violence.
It's making it so like, okay, so I watched 1917, me myself. I respect life, but now I watch this thing, I see a guy cut his hand on barbed wire and then accidentally get pushed and stick his hand into a corpse, and I laugh. And I go, I shouldn't laugh, but I laughed at that
You
moment.
should be repulsed.
But
yeah.
but also I went, it's so over the top and it's a movie, right? So I can, but that's me, and I can go, I know I'm not going to go out and have some violent act. I know I'm not going to premeditate something. I know I'm not going to, if I snap in some way, it's not going to be to harm other people. But somebody else watching these things and growing up with this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
for all the violence, like even Force Awakens. Sorry, real quick.
No, go ahead.
Like some of they're blasting stormtroopers, and stormtroopers through like Chewbacca, Han Solo shooting them with Chewbacca's crossbow, and they're flying, and everyone's like, "Wee!" And I was like, "Oh my god!" Like that got to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "This is Star Wars. This feels wrong." Even though the old Star Wars, they're blasting stormtroopers left and right.
But they weren't flying like 40 feet.
Right. It wasn't as violent and over the top. Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
I completely agree with you. I think it's gotten excessive to the point where we don't even know why we're doing it anymore, and we don't know the influence that it's having on people anymore. And I mean, yeah, with the Joker, I don't want to just rehash all the things that I hated about that movie, but I just hated the subway train scene because that just wasn't realistic to me. That just doesn't I don't know, maybe it does, maybe I'm just living in a bubble of happiness, but
the setup, I get your feeling that the setup felt like contrived, maybe,
because
right?
it wouldn't work.
These douchebags show up and they and they push so hard, and you're like, oh, it's the bully scenario. Okay, these bullies are gonna try and maybe get rapey with a woman, and then they see this weirdo that's laughing, so they're gonna attack him. So that stuff is, you can go, okay, that's contrived. It's a little over the top. But then the violence itself was like stark and felt very real, where it's just like, boom, he shot a guy, boom, in the head, boom, falls dead. Guy gets shot in the chest, freaking out, crying, oh my God, what's happening? That stuff felt very visceral and very real to me.
Yeah,
but
no, that's true.
I get you.
But to what end? What's the point? Like you said, what are we supposed to take from that movie?
Sure. Yeah, what are we supposed to take away?
White guys suck, we should kill rich people. Is that what we're supposed to take from it? Because that seemed to be the message.
Yeah, it was.
No. It's an interesting concoction. So I got 4 left.
Pretty far into my triple threat. Sorry, fellas.
Delicious.
No, you're good.
I think I'm doing all right.
Yeah. 4 left. Two of them I haven't seen, so I'll save those. So 19 we kind of went at length about. Best Picture win because the cinematography, the story construction, all the parts that were necessary to make the film are why it's the best. The downside of it, I would say, was probably because the scene with for me it's just the 2 scenes. It's the if you're going to make a movie which is supposed to be a continuous cut, don't fade to black for 45 seconds. That really struck me the wrong way. I know why they did it, but it struck me the wrong way. And then the scene with the airplane and the company where you're just like, so now time is totally schmishmash, also with the sound being completely gone. Like there's no way you don't hear, like you hear these 3 planes dogfighting a half mile away, but you don't hear a company of 5 heavy lift trucks roll up with like 200 dudes. Like that just so that's, like I said, it's a little thing, but that's all I could pull from it of why.
Well, for you personally, it took you out of it, which I think for me, it took me out of it too. And I went, the mix of that and now characters are doing foolish things that don't seem like they're on task for this very simple plot.
Right. Don't get caught. Let's go investigate a house. Don't do that.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
All right. So then into Matt's favorite, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
So real quick, though, I think while we talked about 1917, for me, that end, when it came to the end, I thought that was very effective, and like the whole futility of war and the whole feeling of like even Benedict Cumberbatch's character, that colonel going, okay, I gave in to hope. That was my bad. Oops, I was hopeful. I need to remember everything sucks. But that through line being like, okay, fine. Tomorrow they're going to send us out. Whether we die today or next week, what does it matter?
I love that moment.
That was very effective.
End. It was great because it shows the sort of British stiff upper lip that they carried through the 2 world wars, and just the practical nature of leadership, where here's this guy who lost a friend making his way to deliver a message to stop a battle, and all he gets at the end is, can you get out of my office? That's pretty much it.
Because the news you gave me pisses me off so much. Thank you. Now get the hell out.
Yeah, basically that's how it ends. Yeah.
And then he goes and finds the brother and has to tell the brother, "Hey, your brother's dead. He was with me wah wah. And that guy, what's his name from Game of Thrones, has to just stand there and just, again, stiff upper lip, just take it and go.
Yeah, this is war. Moving on.
Thank you for telling me.
Yeah.
My brother's dead.
Yeah.
I got to keep it together because I'm a lieutenant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lieutenant.
And then the guy sits down, and you see he has a family, right? That's like that's the very end.
Right.
He's sitting by the tree. Mm-hmm. Oh, he's got a family to get back to, hopefully. Maybe.
Right.
I'm glad that wasn't the driver of the movie. That's always, I love that. I loved that.
Yeah, that it was at the end. That was a good choice.
That it wasn't he pulls it out of his pocket at the beginning of the battle, scene 1. Act 1, take 1, and he puts it back in, and now we know he has a family.
Like every fighter pilot ever who's always got the
Right.
picture of his wife in the cockpit.
I'm going to do a movie where there's fighter pilots, but he just has like his favorite pogs.
It's going to be called Pog Fighter.
It's just like a picture
got
of
my slammer.
a dessert or something.
That'll be
Cup
more
of
like
coffee.
when the Alita sequel sounds like. Oof.
It's about time for Pogs to make it back. Don't you think? Yeah.
Perfect.
We're right around there. Yeah, it should be.
coming back.
Yeah.
25 years.
Yeah.
Even 5 years, Pogs will be huge again.
Yeah.
All right, Maddie.
Okay, here we are. I just watched this one.
My favorite
Once
one.
Upon a Time
we should
Hollywood.
cover this completely on the next one since
In
we've
the
all
next
watched
one.
it because I have a lot to say about this movie.
All right, so
Darth Vader took a spill. Sorry.
Oh no.
my positives
Yeah, he did.
for it are
So good. So good.
So stupid.
I love it.
that's
It's
awesome.
a great setup you got.
Yeah, so the positives for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood winning Best Picture are obviously the Quentin Tarantino has like the reverse cameo factor for me, that he will pull stars into positions they should not be in and pull amazing stuff out of it, but then also uses the same cast of people in a way which every time you're like, oh, there's Don Johnson, but it's not. It doesn't pull you. It doesn't pull me out. It doesn't seem like a kitschy thing. It's just like he's got a stable of people that happen to be very successful. The only one that I don't like that he's picked up recently is Leonardo DiCaprio. But that's just me.
Dare you?
I know.
Oh,
and
even
see, that's,
Maddie, you've said you're hit and miss with him,
Well,
that's- so
a little
that's one of
hit
the
and miss
reasons why I
but not in
outside.
that movie.
But in Tarantino films, this is what he's made for. Leo's made for this kind of dialogue. You continue. We'll talk about this later.
well, no. So my
Type of
issue
character, you're right.
Yeah.
Do I want
My
him to
issue
be
is
the
more
guy that
with,
survives a bear attack? No.
Yeah, my
right.
issue
Don't want
is
him to
more
be
with
the actor
character
who's
that,
insecure.
that
Sure.
Leonardo plays. I have a hard time when he plays a rich, successful person, because for me that doesn't feel like he's acting. It just feels like he's walking.
How
around.
dare you?
Like,
But
I
that
can
feels
imagine
appropriate
His
for
day,
me.
it's not difficult to be like a rich playboy ladies man. I imagine that's not a stretch for him.
But what? Okay.
But what
so
about a
what
rich,
have you
sad
watched
playboy?
that you feel is a stretch that worked for you? Like I talk about that. What the heck's that movie where he played Glass? He played like the biggest badass American guy
The
of
Aviator?
all time, getting attacked by a bear. No, the bear one.
Oh, the Remnant.
Revenant.
Revenant.
Yeah, like that's a story I already knew, and then it was like,
Yeah.
oh, they're gonna make a movie, and they're casting Leonardo DiCaprio, and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna watch it.
But he won
It's
Best
so miscast
Actor,
already.
didn't
Because
He
they
did win
said
Best
So it
Actor.
we
wasn't-
need
did
to
you
give
not
him
like
an
it?
Oscar or he's gonna kill himself. No, I haven't seen it
What are we
because I
talking
refuse
about
to
then?
watch him in that role
No, it's a decent
because
movie,
he's
but it's-
miscast.
Right. It's
Fundamentally,
it's
for me, I
it's
go,
kind of like it's
he shouldn't play that guy.
It's not. It's only
We
miscast.
need
if
a
you've seen it and you hate it.
grizzled-looking badass dude to be that character.
no right. Yeah, you got to get like a
Well,
Even
a
Brad
different person.
Pitt, I would take more than him. I would go, okay, Brad Pitt, whatever, fine. He's
you guys are
pretty,
way
but
off base about
he-
Leo because he is.
No, about that movie though. I'm
Well-
not saying he's bad. I'm just saying it's like Mark Wahlberg. For me, Mark Wahlberg, if he plays some dumbass, I love him. I think he's cast perfectly. If he plays the hero of some real life American tragedy moment, I say, get the F out of here. I'm not going to watch you. You're
Right. I
not
don't
a
believe it for a
hero.
second,
You're a
right.
jackass.
Well, maybe-
play a jackass and I'll love you.
Maybe what we do is we watch The Revenant, and then we can decide.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will watch The Revenant. I will do it because I want to watch it for cinematography.
Yeah,
I do.
because it's The Departed was fine. It was fine, and it has all the guys we're talking about in it. But what was his other Scorsese? Gangs of New York.
Oh, it was.
Not,
and he also did Money.
Way
Gangs
back.
of New York was
Wolf
not.
of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street
is
good.
great.
That, I thought
in
he
that.
was cast well, right? He's cast correctly.
He's brilliant in that movie.
He's a rich douchebag, and you go, I get it. He has a soft face. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
But there's
you
a
look
I think
at
it
him
spurns
and you go,
from-
it fits.
There's a different
For
level
me,
he
it
goes
spurned
to.
from The Great Gatsby.
I didn't see
Like,
Gatsby.
Caprio as Gatsby. It's like he just woke up and put on a suit from the 1960s.
Right.
That's
It fits.
or the whatever's like. He's this
30s,
rich
40s.
playboy. Like, how do I get into character for a rich playboy? Like, no, he just.
I need
woke
to
up.
know what it is though why you think he's not the good addition to Tarantino's
Hugh
films.
Glass.
Oh,
Sorry.
in the Tarantino things,
Yeah.
I think it's because.
Tell me why you're wrong.
I think it's because of the types of films that Tarantino makes. They're very rarely about the rich man. Like if you look at like Django and Pulp Fiction and just all of his films, they're never really focused around people that have ability or don't suffer in some form or way. It's always about somebody who's a little middle class or lower, is always struggling, definitely has to make exceptions or decisions outside of comfort to progress
but
through
there's
their
always
life.
a rich antagonist. There's always a money man
So
or something like
he
that.
was
in his
great.
movies.
He was great in Django Unchained, and that's so I was 100% okay with Leonardo DiCaprio being cast in that position for Django Unchained, but and again it's like movie stars playing movie stars that are currently movie stars. It just felt like to me like I don't know if Leonardo DiCaprio is necessarily always the right casting call for a Tarantino film, because he now has to start writing in a rich antagonist or a protagonist type character where he may have strayed away from that in the past. So now it feels like he's modifying, and I could be wrong, but it feels like he's
I don't think
he's
that's the
switching
case.
his style.
Well, I think that this story intrigued him. The Polanski
100%.
sort of
Yeah.
all of the what was that guy's name? The guy
Who?
with the swastika on his forehead. Charles Manson.
Charles
James
Manson?
Charles Manson.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Don't speak about it. James Manson, he's an upstanding
Yeah,
citizen.
right.
But that Charles Manson,
I think just the whole story and
it's-
sort of the retelling, and it's sort of a choose your own adventure alternate telling of that time period. That's what interested him, and I think then he certainly writes for actors, but I don't know if he's necessarily grasping to find something for Leo to be in or something like that. And
it'll be his next film.
He's a supporting role to a certain extent. I mean, everybody is in all of his movies to a certain extent, and I think that's just where he really shines, is when he's playing a character that isn't Titanic, it isn't Departed. He has to be a cog in a massive wheel, and something about his relationship with Tarantino, I guess, just makes for magic, because I thought it was great. I loved his character in it because he was so not Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt was like this rustic, earthy stuntman. Who was sort of he was representative of the times, whereas Leo's character wasn't.
The character that he was the reality of what Leo's characters were, right?
Right.
Leo's playing this tough lawman, this tough guy that could just take whatever, and Brad Pitt's playing the reality, who's living a crappy life.
Exactly.
And Leo is the pretty boy going, oh, my career, and Brad Pitt doesn't chastise him. He just goes, oh, you're complaining that you're going to have to go to Italy and make a bunch of cool westerns? Oh, boo-hoo, you know? Maybe it's not so bad.
Right, exactly.
So I mean, there's definitely a lot of room in this movie for it to win Best Picture. I think I was talking with somebody. I think one of the best all-time scenes from last year is when they're filming the Western. And I want to know the backstory of this, but my perception of this was they didn't tell anybody but Leonardo DiCaprio what to do in the scene. And it's the scene in which he's sitting at the table and he's there with Timothy Oliphant, and he messes up his line. But this is why I want to know the backstory, is because having been on a set and seen like people that are in like they're on a mark or they have certain things they're supposed to be doing or whatever. If you watch Timothy Olyphant in that scene, it almost feels like they did not tell him that they were still filming, that they were still rolling. That like it's almost like, oh, Leo blew a take. Let's just kind of keep rolling. But you can watch him like stay in his position, keep set, get ready for the next action. Almost like they just left the cameras going, but it was a film on a film on a film kind of thing. And it's amazing scene because Leonardo DiCaprio is doing his lines and his stuff, but then watching the people around him not treat it like it's actors on a film set being filming a movie. It's, we're just going to run the camera. I'm only going to tell Leo to screw up this line and start over and do whatever you have to do to recenter or whatever. I'm not going to tell anybody else that's what's happening. Because I think there's even a point where like an AD comes in on the side, or like somebody comes up with a makeup touch up or something like that. Like something that felt like totally, completely natural. But it was so good right then and there.
Well, the director was going, keep it going, don't jump out of it. And Leo's going, I got to cut. And the director's going, no, just keep going.
I think what you're seeing is actors being actors. You know, I mean, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing
it got very
perfectly
meta.
Constructed movie within a movie, so everyone's an actor. But what you're seeing is two actors doing something that they're very used to doing, and that's standing in place, waiting. Okay, now it's your line.
But
so
like,
you're just
but,
you're
right,
just
so
seeing
even if that was scripted.
Oh, and it was. It absolutely was.
So,
it was like
no. That's the thing.
directed,
So even if it was scripted, it felt totally like we got like a behind the scenes, like a little blip, and that's why I thought it was one of the best scenes of the year because it's like that. That was probably the most true I'm watching a movie being made moment I've probably ever seen in a movie.
Yeah.
It was so crazy good.
Yeah.
And then, you know, aside from like the ending, the downside, the things I would negative on this movie, there's some points where it's just like him watching Brad Pitt driving a car for like 10 minutes. And I'm like, that's cool and it's great you got Neil Diamond in there, but
that's very Tarantino.
But then I also don't like how I was not sure, like I knew the time period was about the Manson family and the murder of Sharon Tate, but it just felt like it was something that was kind of shoehorned in to the whole thing. Like it didn't feel, and I don't know if I would have wanted more connection or less connection, but it definitely didn't feel like the right amount. Cause like, especially when you like most of Margot Robbie's scenes were her like watching her own film and laughing. You know, like, so wait, is this about Sharon Tate or is she just like in the room? Like it just, like I said, I either wanted more coordination or significantly less.
Right. The feeling of you think, okay, is she going to get killed as real history happened? Oh no, we're going to say, what if those people went into this other house?
Yeah.
Where this
it just felt like
man
it was
with
just,
a
for me, it was
pit bull
like you
is
knew
hanging
that
out.
because there was the whole story that Roman Polanski wrote Quentin Tarantino and was like, what the hell do you think you're doing? And then Tarantino sent him a script and Roman Polanski basically said, I'm just not going to get in the way.
Well, I think
he didn't say no. You can't.
I think the story goes. It was since Polanski's still kind of like whatever he is, sequestered somewhere else or whatever,
hiding.
Yeah. It was actually a friend. One of his.
He's
very
been Me
close
Too'd
friends,
for decades.
Yeah, one of his very close friends read the script and then relayed to Roman Polanski, "You have nothing to worry about." That was what it was.
Yeah, right. So how that pans out, but I think, like I said, it for me it was just like either more focus on the connection to the Manson family because he goes out to the ranch and he meets the children and all that, and like so there's that stuff which is really really good, but then. Then he like
very
goes to Italy to film.
Sure.
It was like,
and then the second they get back from Italy. So how are you guys doing? I could just knock out the next episode now, frankly. Since we're sitting here, if you want to do a 2-for-1, I could just do it. But I'm not saying we need to, but I could do it.
I got two more and I didn't see them, so I could be really brief.
No, we'll go ahead and just power through with what Nick's got. Yeah, we'll save it. Yeah.
Okay.
You guys no, Eric. No, we're not.
It'll give us time to watch it again. I need to watch it again to.
Because I mean, the truth is, like,
I'm fresh
I don't know. You know how critical I can be, and I'm not a fanboy of anybody's in terms of like I'm just gonna love it because it's theirs. I loved it. Well, here's the thing: like I love Todd Phillips. I thought that War Dogs was awesome. I thought War Dogs was such a good movie. Joker ate dirty balls, and so I think.
Oh no, you're very candid with what you feel.
Yeah. So, but in this case,
and it doesn't matter who it is.
I think that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is like, I mean, it's just so hard because
it's your pick for Best Picture.
Inglourious Basterds
in your mind wins Best Picture.
Inglourious Basterds his best movie or is Django his best movie? I don't know. And then he threw in this movie, and I'm like, now I don't know it again. So, just so many good movies.
Yeah. So we can watch those and discuss that next week. So the last two, in fairness to them, I did not see. It was Little Women and Marriage Story. So for me, because I didn't see them, they're automatically disqualified from winning Best Picture.
Because you don't have an opinion.
So the reasons I would say, the only thing I could say is why I didn't go see them is one, I'm not the demographic for Little Women, and I think this story has been remade like 50 times already. So for me, it's kind of like how can you possibly?
But it sounds like they actually, from people that have seen it, go,
that's fair.
Oh,
yeah, and that's fair. But like I said, I'm not the demographic for that movie, so that's a tough one for me.
The demographic going in, right? But I think the point of it is that it's like there are a lot of movies that I don't want to go see. If I go see it, I go, yeah, it's a great movie.
It is a very Pride and Prejudice type thing, though, where it's like, does that need to be your next movie? Like, okay, I'll be real not sensitive right now about this topic.
You're the editor. You can say whatever you want.
That's true. I can't I?
Just
if you
a 5-minute bleep
me
right here.
to take you seriously as a female director, keep making things like Lost in Translation. Keep making things. I think that's something Sofia Coppola has done brilliantly. Is she's continued to make really engaging, really interesting, really original art. You want me to take you seriously? Don't make your follow-up to your last film, Little Women or Pride and Prejudice or anything along those lines.
Right.
You have to keep on making things that are engaging and interesting and keep reinventing yourself. So that was just kind of where I was at on that one. Again, and I haven't seen it either, and I thought Lady Bird was amazing film, really well done.
Exactly.
But it was just like, is that really you're doing that? All right. It's the same though. It's the same as if an indie director suddenly is doing a Marvel movie. I feel the same way because it's the same thing where it's like, really, you're gonna follow up the station agent with this or whatever. It's like you can't, you have to. That's so. It's just judgmental. But I just really think that if you want to be taken seriously in a certain respect, you keep on making the movies, and then when you've kind of built that cachet, then that's when you do your take on Emma or whatever. So
right. So that's that one. And then the last one is Marriage Story, which all I've seen of that one is obviously the Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson breakdown in the apartment. It just, for me, it seems like you've got to be in a very specific headspace to watch this movie, and depending if you're not there, it could take you good places, it could take you bad places, which is probably why it got nominated. But it's also why I steered clear of it, because it's like, man, this, like, I want to watch some stuff blow up and maybe a car.
Sure.
Well, like, that's the thing. I don't know.
Two of us have been divorced here
to handle this.
Right. Now, neither of us had kids, so it's like if you were a person who had kids and went through a divorce, woof. Yeah.
I watched.
Do you want to relive that?
The first season of Divorce, Thomas Hayden Church and Sarah Jessica Parker, and they're so good in it, but I just had to stop watching it because it was just too close to home to those feelings that you truly do have, and it's not feelings that I ever want to relive or rethink. And so that's where Marriage Story was not something. And listening to Noah on another podcast talking about it wasn't necessarily word for word or anything like that, but obviously he was drawing on his experience as a person who's been divorced and on his experience as a kid going through that with his own parents. I just had no interest in living in that headspace with him. I was just like, no, I'm good.
Right.
Yeah, I want to go on that journey.
Yeah, like I said, that is a very specific time and place to be in, and while that's probably what makes it one of the best pictures of the year is because it's so strong. Like that's not a journey. I want to go down necessarily.
Married or divorced or single.
Yeah, married, divorced, single. Like that's a very specific.
Choice.
It's not a happy movie. You know, it's not a feel good by design. So it's like if I want to not feel good, a million other ways to do that.
Knowing him and his writing style and his directing style, I'm sure it's a perfectly beautifully constructed film, and probably has moments of levity and some really good stuff. But yeah, it wasn't a journey that I had any interest in going down.
No, well, it was kind of like Manchester by the Sea a couple years ago.
Yeah, I love that one
with Casey Affleck, and I
loved
hated
it.
that movie.
I thought it was amazing.
I heard people were super. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I either heard you loved it or screw that movie.
Yeah.
Well, it's brilliant. Part of it is because again, you've got to be in a very specific headspace for it.
I live by Manchester by the Sea.
You do. It's true.
Yeah, I go up to the North Shore here in Massachusetts. It's Manchester's one of the stops on the commuter rail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have good friends that live up there too, and it's like, it's the circumstances. The story is amazing. The story of it was amazing, but when you have a character on screen that you just want to reach through the screen and choke the life out of them, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. And that movie did it. Oh yeah, like you wanted to go back in time and push him into the burning house. That's how bad it was. Just like, oh god,
yeah.
You're just like, I don't know. That's why I didn't like it, because it's like I couldn't. Once you get to a point where you despise or hate a character or where a character is being played, that's really hard to recover from. Like that's just really hard.
So it was how the character was being played, or you just felt that way about the character. You were just that upset with him and the choices he was making within
the character
the
versus
the
the actor is what you're asking.
I think it was a little bit of both, maybe. I don't know. That's a tough one to say, because I if I played the game of recasting it, I probably wouldn't have put a famous person in that role.
Well, it was going to be
just so that it wasn't.
I think it was going to be Ben.
Well, but even so, like I wouldn't put a famous person in that role, because it's such a very divisive character that like you have to create somebody that somebody is going to hate and despise on purpose. Yeah, it's just like the guy in Ford versus Ferrari who was the executive, the other director. I can't remember the guy's name. I want to say Josh Lucas, but I don't think that's right. Yeah, that's it. He played the guy who basically dicked over Christian Bale's character in the Le Mans race. Yeah. That character is designed to be despised. Now, it's even scarier that that's a real person. Right. Like, that's based off a real guy. So that's tough. But, yeah, when a character is designed to be hated so much, you either have to already choose a person that somebody hates or choose a no-name character and let them, unfortunately, like, take that hit.
Well, and
for me at least, choose an Affleck. It's perfect.
It didn't fall at a good time, because when he got nominated was right around the time that he was getting
the accusations
were happening. So it didn't go well at that point in time. But yeah, it wasn't the kind of movie that you would think that I would really think was great. But
I can see how, from like a story writing and a construction standpoint, you would absolutely take it as inspiration, because they did a good use of flashback. They did a good use of taking stuff you don't know and then just walking forward with it until a third of the way or 3/4 of the way through the movie, they flash back and you get the source. Like, you understand the source of this. We just watched The Way Back. Speaking of Affleck, we watched The Way Back not too long ago, like last week, I think. And it's the same kind of thing where Ben Affleck's character
that Weeby Duncan movie. That's
yes, it's that one. Yeah, that's so
that was the runner-up to the title.
Yeah, Weeby Duncan.
He's a downtrodden alcoholic who is tapped to coach his basketball team, and you're like, God, what could possibly be your problem? And then you find out, like 2/3 of the way through the movie,
as a train wreck actor. Yeah. What actor could just be a washed-up alcoholic who is just sad?
Get to the books.
Yeah, that seems a perfect casting in that moment.
Yeah, it's a tough one. But anyway. All right.
Was that all of them?
That
was
list.
The list. The listo.
Yeah.
Bon voy listo.
Correct.
So this will be about 2 hours and 40 minutes of audio for the listener. But you know what?
That's as
Most of
long.
us-
That is the time of Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh no, we're past Once Upon a Time. Damn.
How long was
Okay.
that movie?
It was like 1:35, 1:40.
okay.
Or
Yeah.
2 hours and 35, 40 minutes.
Well, thank you for listening, folks. If you haven't already, we would love for you to subscribe to the Smoking Hot Nerds on iTunes or Spotify. And I've just started posting this video of our podcast on YouTube, on my own YouTube, on 9 Stories Creative. So I just got them uploaded last night. Thanks to 15 megabits per second, it took roughly 5 hours to upload the 2 videos. So yeah, I know. I should put them on a thumb drive, take them on my laptop into the studio, use the internet there, and upload it. It'll take about 5 minutes. But I mean, a 2-hour movie.
I watched them and I immediately got extremely self-conscious.
Right. Well,
Sorry, I did not want to watch myself.
yeah. No, I'm not watching myself too much. I like listening though. It's been kind of nice. So thank you to everyone who listened, and we will talk to you all next week.
And feel free to bug us about stuff you want to hear us talk about too. We're not too early in the game to take
feel free.
suggestions.
Feel free to let us know what you would like.
Herbie the Love Bug, Huey the Love Chopper.
To be completely honest with you,
That
the three of
Vietnam
us could just do
comedy.
this over and over and over again and self-entertain.
Oh, yeah.
But if there's a topic that is jumping out at you, or if there's a debate you want us to settle, don't worry.
We'll get there.
We can go down that road.
So feel free to like, comment, and subscribe on all platforms, as they would say.
Woo.
See ya.